This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by iZotope, Native Instruments, SAE Institute, Atom Audio, Spectra 1964, and Picker. In fact, you're hearing my voice right now recorded through a Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre and mixed with iZotope, Ozone, and RX on Atom Audio monitors and headphones. Grab my free mixing course at Mixmaster Bundle with the link in the show notes below. And please make sure to visit our fantastic sponsors also in the show notes and like and subscribe to our YouTube channel because it's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
But I think sometimes in the studio, people get so just caught up on a single idea that it just completely slows down the process, right? You know, and you could spend 30 minutes debating about the merits of a single idea, or you could just spend 30 minutes just moving on to the next thing, knowing that you've got the power of the mute button. You know, the mute button is your friend. I love that idea that a song isn't finished when you can't add anything more, but it's a song is finished when you can't take away anything else. You know, before it completely pulls apart. You know, the power of the mute button is so underappreciated. And I think, you know, you see that with like Chad Blake a lot, right? Where he just goes through and he's just like, no, muting the drums here, muting the bass line just for this like one bar. And man, that's how you make a really dynamic record, is actually like playing the silences, playing the gaps, rather than just filling in every single moment of the song.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Dreaming of a career in audio or the entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs where you'll learn on professional-grade gear with industry pros, learning through real projects, not just lectures. Explore studio production, live sound, audio for film, and a whole lot more. Or take the entertainment business program to learn about contracts, promotion, and more. With diploma, associate, and bachelor's programs, there's a path for you. Book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. Howdy, Rockstars. It's your host, Lid Shaw. Welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Toby Lloyd, a music producer, studio engineer, and mixing engineer who runs Tiny Triumph Recordings, a boutique rooftop recording studio in Wellington, New Zealand. Toby has collaborated with artists such as Shapeshifter, Hollie Smith, Stan Walker, and Nightmares on Wax. He's also contributed to major film projects, including Avatar 2, the Hobbit Trilogy, Mortal Engines, and Hunt for the Wilderpeople, as well as mixing scores for acclaimed films like Savage, Stylebender, Ka Whawhai Tonu, which I don't know if... Did I pronounce that correctly?
Ka Whawhai Tonu. It's
Ka Whawhai Tonu. Oh, sweet, man. In addition to his studio and film work, Toby is also making new music as an artist himself. Excited to talk about that. And a big thank you and a shout out to my brother from another podcast, Matt Boudreau at Working Class Audio, for making our introduction. Please welcome Toby Lloyd to Recording Studio Rockstars. Toby, my man, are you ready to rock, dude?
Ready to rock, man. I was born ready.
Glad to have you here. So I would say the very first question I have, and that everybody's going to have is, dude, what is up with that view behind you, man?
It's insane, eh? It's absolutely bonkers. It's been such a source of inspiration living here and just waking up every single morning. And I've got a little cold plunge outside, so I'll come down and sit outside looking at this view. And it's insane.
You're rocking the Wim Hof cold plunge?
I certainly am. I
never
thought that was in my future. I'm a skinny dude, and I thought, you know, freezing my nipples off every single morning was not going to be in my future, but been doing it for about a year now, and it's an amazing way to start the day.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, I'm like you. I'm extra skinny right now because I just finished. Long story. I just finished a 54-day juice fast,
Mm.
but I've been doing some of the cold dip stuff outside. But I sort of wait till the winter and then just fill up a 100-gallon tub, and then it ices over. But you actually got the special thing. And then what's the season like for you right now? Like what are the seasons like in New Zealand? And are you going on in the mornings? It's actually already cold, or is it sort of summer days and you're going out there?
Do you know the band Crowded House from New Zealand?
Yeah,
Yeah, so they've got that song Four Seasons in One Day. That's
that's
what
right.
it's like to
I
live in
think
New
I just
Zealand.
saw
Like,
them perform that here recently, actually.
really? Yeah, I mean
Mhm.
it's so accurate. Yesterday I got up in the morning and it was sunny as anything. It was like I was outside with my top off. I was getting some sun. It was so hot, and within about an hour and a half from that, it was like hailing. So
Wow.
yeah.
Well, we get that in the summertime here in Nashville. We get like golf ball size hail sometimes, which makes me a little scared because my car's parked right out there. But what are you gonna
Well,
do?
I mean, yeah, and Wellington, where I live, is the windiest city in the world. That's not like an exaggeration. It's considered the windiest city in the world, like windier than Chicago, windier than those like cities down in Argentina. It's we get like
Wow.
130k winds come through here and massive storms. So it's I don't know. It makes you feel alive, that's for sure.
Well, it's also funny. I think I learned once that Chicago being called the Windy City was a play on words. So it's like it's literally windy, but it's also like it was a nod to the politics of Chicago. It was just a bunch of hot air, which I thought was really really hilarious. So now, what about this incredible view behind you? You're just way up high. You sort of like look down off the mountainside to that to seeing the water. I mean, it looks like I'm seeing islands sort of dotting off into the distance behind you.
Yeah. There's I basically I live in a area called Kandala, and it's like a suburb overlooking the city. So it's up high on a mountain. We're looking into the inlet of Wellington, and there's a couple of little islands over there, and the city's down in here. So I can literally see, the CBD, which is where my studio is, and I run to work every single day. So I kind of run down the hill and then work for 10 hours in the studio, and then I'll run back up the hill. Yeah, no,
That's
it's amazing.
Literally like a run, like that's part of your exercise is just running to the studio and back.
Yeah, I do about 10Ks a day. So it's about 5Ks to the studio. So I'll run to the studio, work for 10 hours, and then run home. And so I'm putting in 50, 60Ks a week just from
Wow.
running to work.
That's amazing. You know what? Now it's coming back to me. I think that was one of the things that Matt mentioned when he was like, you got to meet this guy, Toby, man. He's into all the same weird shit you are.
And the funny thing is about collecting all these weird things is you don't realize you're weird because it's not like you do all of these things at once, right? You don't just like
Right.
dive straight into cold plunges and running and meditating and like, all of those things. You just kind of tack them on over time. And then all of a sudden you kind of realize that you're just bloody weird. And like not many people actually do this stuff.
Yeah. Well, for me, as a single guy still, it's, you hit a point where you're like, all right, I'm getting really niche with my interests. Like I don't even think they make a dating app for this, this particular focus of mine. Well, that's very cool. So let's back up. Let's jump in and hear a little bit of your backstory. So, what's your age bracket right now, and how did you get from being interested in music to having this super cool studio set up and then, making really great sounding records?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really, really long road. I guess like a lot of people, I started off by, hearing Nirvana for the first time and falling in love with guitar, and, then just became obsessed. And I would go out to parties with my friends, and I'd just leave as soon as I could so I could go home and play more guitar. And I used to be an avid basketball player, and I was convinced that I was going to end up playing in the NBA, but I ended up quitting all of that just to focus more on guitar and writing songs and playing music. And it was definitely wasn't a way to meet girls. It was more just an expression, and just getting into punk rock and playing all of that kind of stuff.
Were you
So
doing the band thing as well?
I was doing the band thing. Yeah. So I was kind of like when I was in high school, I was playing shows and just practicing and playing with my band every moment that I could. And that's kind of how I fell into recording was we found this guy that was going to record our album, and we went around to his place and he recorded on this like 8-track Tascam recorder or something like that in his parents' like bougie house. And when it came time to mixing, he was it wasn't really mixing, it was probably just balancing, but I was getting him to make all these changes. I'm like, nah, this doesn't sound right, this doesn't sound right. And he basically said, man, you should become a sound engineer. And something about that just really resonated. It was around the same time that I heard Perfect Circle, 13th Step, which Sylvia Massey engineered, and it was just, it was just such an amazing record to listen to sonically. So I'd enrolled in a year of a Bachelor of Commerce and spent a year learning accounting and management and marketing. I was just like, stuff this. This is not it. And so I enrolled in audio engineering and just went hard, just learned everything I could, tried to be in the studio as much as I could. And then when I came out, I moved to Wellington, which is the city that I'm in now. And there wasn't work going around. There was just, it's the kind of industry in New Zealand where people don't really hire people for their recording studios. You've just got to build a recording studio and run it yourself.
I think I saw a video where you were talking about that, something about like you're going to school and your professor's telling you you'll never work as a recording engineer or something like that.
It's the best advice. Yeah. It's this is a really, really brutal industry, and you've got to have thick skin. And if someone tells you that you're not going to make it and you believe them, then you're probably not cut out for it. It really is.
He was just trying to weed you out. He's trying to see if you were up to the challenge. He thought you looked punk rock enough to just be like, man, you can't tell me that.
Yeah. You know what? I think he was being genuine. I think he was jaded, and he'd ended up, working in this institute teaching a whole bunch of students. And he probably saw like a whole lot of students not coming out getting work. So he probably believed it. But I think, to be fair, out of the class that I studied with, I think there's only one other guy that actually got, managed to find work in this industry. But I do think that this industry, you need to have thick skin, right? And I think those kind of conversations are the ones that are really, really important, because it can take a long time to make this a career. I think there's so many Instagram videos and YouTube videos where you're just like, oh, all you need is the plugins and a laptop and you can make a career out of this. And it's like, actually, social proof is really, really important, and working on cool records. Yeah. Like, it's a big risk for an artist to spend a couple of weeks working on a track with someone who's may not be doing good work, and they might come to the end of that process and they might not be proud of it, and they might not want to put it out. So it does take a long time to actually do those 10,000 hours.
Try working on a record for 2 years, and then it doesn't come out.
Is that what happened to you?
That happened. Oh yeah. The very first major label record I did, 2 years working on that thing.
Wow. Why didn't it come out?
Mixed it with Tom Lord Algae, and then there's just when the band was doing the artwork and I was back home again, the label was just like, yeah, we're letting you guys go. We're just shelving the record.
And it never came out?
Never came out. No, Hollywood Records back in the day. So I got a great experience out of it, but nobody ever got to hear my work,
Oh, you must have learned a lot working with Tom though, right?
Oh my God, tons, man. I mean, the first thing I learned was, dude, Liz, you need to not talk so fucking much in the studio. He's trying to work and mix. You keep asking him questions.
And that dude likes to talk as well.
That he does? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it.
Probably, yeah. He probably knew exactly where I was coming from. He let me know in a great way. It was close to Christmas time, and there was sort of a dinner that we all had, and they were giving out just little Christmas, gifts, like party gifts to everybody who was there. And mine was a T-shirt, and it just said, "You have the right to remain silent, so please shut up."
Oh, that's great.
Which is awesome. But yes, I digress. So yeah, he was great, and to your point, working on stuff when it doesn't come out. What do you take away from that? You kind of just take away the experience and/or some of the connections you made with people in that process. In these days, it's a little easier these days to find ways to share something that you did, because we've got these, at least face-to-face tools like Samply, where you could play, here's some music I've done for somebody, that kind of thing. But anyway, yeah, continue.
Yeah, I mean, there's lessons everywhere, right? And I think I've learned just probably even more so on the records that I've worked on that haven't come out than the ones that have. And that might be, that might be more of a social thing. It might be more of like artist management and really like nurturing those relationships. It might be like listening better, like what you said, right? There's that old saying that we have two ears and one mouth, and actually learning to listen more than we talk is a really, really important thing. And I think that comes along with working with artists, actually like asking better questions when you're working with them and truly understanding what their vision is. And some artists, I think the ones that haven't come out have, for me, have been the ones where I've worked with an artist that maybe hasn't had a clear vision. And then through the process of working on a record, towards the end of it, then they've started being like, oh, actually, no, I want it to be more like that. So I think actually really diving deep into what that vision actually is as early as possible is the best way to make sure that records are actually going to come out.
Yeah, I think that's fair, man. I think that's fair. And also that learning to listen more than talking is really good advice for a podcast host as well.
I have a podcast as well, which I've kind of put on hold because I ended up writing a novel, and so like my novel took the focus, and then I also worked on my own record, so that took the focus. I'm going to come back to my podcast at some point soon because I've interviewed some of my musical heroes and Academy Award winners and stuff like that. But very, very early on in making the podcast, my partner said to me after listening to a couple of episodes, she's like, "You're talking as much as the guests. Like, you need to rein it in, Toby, because this sounds more like they're interviewing you." So yeah, it's hard lessons, but important ones.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it's an advantage to have somebody else who's actually listening to your first episodes telling you that too.
It gives you a chance to get it right, especially when, those early episodes where I was kind of more interviewing more local people. And then as soon as I started interviewing more international people, I'd kind of managed to get the art down a little bit.
Yeah, well, maybe she was giving you, maybe there's a hidden message in there. It's like, I think you need to listen to me a little bit more. So, and again, I mean, you've got an incredible spot there. You should just host it right from that view. So yeah, the podcast, that's amazing. And then what's with doing a novel, man? I mean, of course, I mean, everybody's writing a novel, so I guess it's not that big a deal. But yeah, what's your novel about?
Yeah, it was a story that I'd wanted to write for a long time, and as soon as I started writing it, it was very, very clear that the story didn't want to be what I was writing, and I wanted to be something else. And I think that's the perfect analogy for working on music. Sometimes when we go on to create a record, we have an idea of what the songs want to be. And then as soon as we start working on the record, like if you're really, really in tune and you're present, you can actually realize that the music is telling you that it actually wants to be something else. And it's your ego that's like, no, it needs to be this. But actually, if you just truly listen to the music, it's saying what it wants to be. You've just got to listen, right? And the same thing was was the process with the novel. I started writing it and I was like, oh, it doesn't want to be this. So it's a story. I don't know. It's a story about life. It's a story about suffering. It's a story about kind of overcoming obstacles. It's like the kind of classic hero story, right? And there's a lot of metaphor that's sprinkled through there based on my life, based on things that have happened. Like I got 3 beautiful kids and I got divorced maybe like 4 years ago. So it's kind of like, and then coming out of that and meeting, the love of my life and, kind of nestling all these kind of little parts of my life into this fiction, which is kind of like a post-apocalyptic tale of a man who's basically journeying to the other side of the earth to find his beloved. And it's quite an emotional story. And it was just a beautiful, cathartic process of going through and just diving into that form of art, which I haven't spent a lot of time doing. But I'm hoping to put it out next year. I mean, the whole publishing world is just strange now because of AI. You can just get ChatGPT to write your book. So I don't know. It's to me, I think the best form of art is just creating because you've got something to say and you've got something to express. And whether or not it goes out and sells 1 million copies or my kids have got a copy on their bookshelf, I think actually just expression is such a beautiful thing. And in an age where you can just go to your phone and just say, write me a song that sounds like Drake meets Ariana Grande and it just makes it for you. I think the process of creation is far more important than the outcome.
I totally agree with you. I think it's the, I mean, they talked about that when I was in architecture school back in the 80s, was that it's the journey, not the destination, that matters. Like you better love the journey because that's what it's all about. So I've always trying to keep that to heart too. And, we talk about that a lot on the show too, is this idea of, when do you know something's finished? Records are never finished. They're abandoned. That's true of anything, including novels, I'm sure. So to that point, that trying to ever arrive at the destination, you almost never really do. Because like when you get there, we grapple with this concept of like, oh, I think I could still work on it. I can see stuff. I can hear things that could be better. I don't remember what the reference was. I'm trying to decide if I already heard you say that about something. Just that moment where we are self-critiquing and we get caught up in that because it'll slow us down. It'll slow us down, or we will think that we'll think negatively of ourselves because we get caught in the self-critique or the not self-critiquing. And what occurred to me is that we should welcome the self-critique. We should welcome the fact that there's never a destination for this single reason. It's the very act of observing something and then thinking, I see something that I can do with this. I see the next step that I can take that moves us forward as an artist. So if we ever arrived at the destination and there wasn't a next step, that would just mean that we didn't have a vision as an artist in that moment. So that's like, it's totally natural that we will always feel that way. And that's why we just go on to the next project.
And I think that's, you absolutely nailed it. It's like, it is about the process. I think this day and age, people are very outcome focused. They're very focused on like ChatGPT, write me this book, or Sono, create me the song. I don't think happiness is outcome based. I think it's process based. When, I've used this analogy before, but like the people that hike the Himalayas, it takes a year of preparation or whatever to get ready for it, and then it takes like months to climb it. And when you're on the top of Mount Everest, you're there for 5 to 15 minutes before you have to come down because the oxygen's so thin, or like whatever the conditions are so harsh, you can't stay up there, so you've got to come down. And so I think that's true for our careers. I think that's true for our lives, is that we live on the path, right? We live on the journey. We don't live at the destination. And I think the goal is to try and find happiness in the process, not in the outcomes. And it is easy as an artist to lose the forest for the trees, and you can be working on a project and you can just be critiquing it. And I think that critique is actually really, really important, right? You've got to be self-critical. But if you're getting to a point where you're like turning the hi-hat down 0.2 dB and thinking it's going to make it a better song, you're starting to lose perspective. Like a little bit of that is important, because good mixes really do live and die in the details. But if you're up to mix revision 9 and you're making those kind of changes, the problem's with the song, probably not with the mix.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it, because I definitely find myself there, and I find myself there more working on my own music. Rockstars, if you want the ultimate toolkit for your music, check out Complete 15 from Native Instruments. With 165 instruments and over 150,000 sounds to choose from, it is the most powerful creative tool in your studio. From Contact 8 to Massive X, Battery, and Guitar Rig 7 Pro, you've got everything you need to create in any genre. Pair that with Native Instruments control keyboards and machine hardware, and you get next level integration that makes music creation fun, fast, and seamless. Head on over to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Let's talk about that a little bit, because and the reason I bring this up, I know you're working on your own music now, and I think we can get in this position where we're doing revisions because we're like, I know I can get this better. I know I never have the freedom and the time when I do other people's music, and now I can do it with mine. And so we will make all these moves that we think are helping and improving, and to your point, they might not be. What do you find that at all you've got this new record out now. Talk a little bit about your experience with, or maybe it's a new single rather. Talk about that if you'd like.
Yeah. So I've got this project called Paper Mountains, which is the artist name. And that was kind of born, I've never sung in my life, right? I never believed that I was going to put out a record with my voice on it. I couldn't sing, but I always wrote songs. And I was so busy producing that and creating art for other people that I never spent time kind of writing my own stuff anymore. I just kind of put it on the back burner. And then I met my current partner, fell in love deeply, and all of a sudden these like love songs started coming out, right? And it was a very, very beautiful process, and it almost felt like they weren't my songs. They were just kind of coming out, and I was just observing them being like, where the hell are these coming from? And so I started writing this record, and my plan was that I was going to create like a 10-track album, and I was going to get all of my famous singers that I know to sing a song each, right? I was going to try and get like, certain artists to each take a song based on their own current style and the style of the song. But the songs started becoming very, very personal. And I started thinking, man, like, I don't know if I want other people to sing these songs. So I just started singing and singing and singing, and I found a range in which my voice kind of actually worked in, and recorded a couple of demos, and I was like, I think this can actually work. And so, I just went through the process of making this album and writing these songs. And it's funny because like what you talk about, right? Like the kind of critiquing and making the changes, I don't think I fully understood that when I was producing other artists, when they were like, oh, can we change this vocal line? Can we change this? I'm like, it's fine. It sounds great. Don't worry about it. Like it's working. But then with my own voice on record, I'm like, I just sent 2 tracks off for mastering to my mastering engineer over in Germany, Robin Schmidt, who's an incredible mastering engineer. I use him for most of my stuff. And he sent back the masters, and I was just like, oh God, that line sounds bad. That line sounds bad. So next minute, I'm in Pro Tools going through all the other takes, like trying to find better takes of like a certain syllable. And it was kind of like that eureka moment where it's like, this is what all the artists that I work with feel, this is that experience. And it gives me a lot of compassion to be on the other side of the glass and realize what they're actually going through, because it's a very, very vulnerable thing, putting your voice out into the world in that way. And so I think I finally understand it. I've been singing these kind of soul folk love songs about my partner and our relationship, and we went through like quite a turbulent time last year where there was like kind of cracks in the relationship forming. And then we came out the other side, and it was so much stronger and beautifuler, or more beautiful, I should say.
I'm going to go with beautifuler.
Beautifuler.
One. Yeah.
We don't speak proper England and New Zealand, so it's fine. So I understand now, what they're going through and how vulnerable that is to really express yourself in that way. And some of these songs on my record are very, very vulnerable, very, very personal. And so it's like, even just putting my voice out there is a very, very vulnerable thing. But to actually put these very kind of intense, kind of emotional lyrics out there, that's just like a whole nother level as well. But to me, I'm such like a determinist that I spend every single day practicing surrender, right? When I hop in the cold plunge and I'm sitting there and I'm like freezing cold and my mind's like, get out. It's like, no, you're fine. Just do it. It's fine. And, every pore in my body is just freezing. I'm like, you're fine. Just deal with it. And so I think all of those practices means that I can go and put this music out into the world and just be like, it's fine. If people hate it, that's fine. It's like, it's an expression, whether or not it blows up and has hundreds of millions of streams, or my mum just batch streams it, like it's about putting art out into the world and expressing yourself. That's the important part. So I think practicing surrender with your own art is actually a really, really powerful thing.
That's great. And I love the analogy between the cold plunge and making the record. So one of the things that I do in the cold plunge when I'm feeling that moment where I'm like, it's really cold, a lot of what's inside me is telling me that I should get up and get out and I should make a face. Instead of making the face, I try and put a big smile on my face and like lay my head back and relax on the edge as if like it's funny or it's like wonderful. And it does change your perspective a little bit. So I'm going to start figuring out how to do that with the music that I'm making. Just smile and lay my head back.
Yeah, I do the same
you know?
thing. As soon as I hop in the cold plunge, I just put a smile on my face and I just sit there. Actually, I ran my first half marathon a couple of months ago, and I'm going to try and hopefully work my way up to an ultra. But I'd heard about these Mexican runners who were just smiling the whole time, right? And they were just running ultra marathons. Exactly, yeah. And so I tried that with my half marathon, and it was amazing. It was so good. And there's all these photos that photographers were standing at this marathon, like taking photos, and they must have a tag on you, and they can send you all the photos of you afterwards. And every single one of the 21Ks pictures of me, I'm just got this big smile on my face. And
that's groovy.
Yeah, and it's such a great practice, right? Like it does shift something in your mind to navigate suffering and pain when you can put a smile on your face and you're like, it's fine. This pain that I'm feeling is totally fine. This freezing cold that I'm feeling is totally fine. Every what's the saying that the only constant is change, or it's like every single pain that you feel, every single kind of freezing pore in your body, that will change. That'll come warm again. Your back pain that you experience, that'll get worse, it'll get better. Everything's changing, and kind of realizing to just be in the moment and allow things to be as they are is a beautiful practice.
Well, you're inspiring me. In fact, I started today by doing some Wim Hof breathing. I've been trying to wanting to get back into that, and I'm like, all right. And I also woke up too early, like 5:30. I'm like, all right, well, this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
But that practice again of the cold dip, and even Wim Hof himself, and I know rock stars were, for those of you who might not know what this is all about, a cold dip it's just literally ice water, and you go get in it and immerse yourself in it. And when, at first glance, you would think, oh my God, it's freezing. I'm going to jump right out. I'm going to get hypothermia. What you learn is you can just simply get in it, and you can sit there for, I usually go for 2 minutes, but you can go longer or you can go shorter. I think they say 1.5 minutes and you get the results, But the, you learn that with mind over experience, you can just shift your perspective and shift your thinking. And now all of a sudden you're absolutely fine. And your body, you actually think warmth in your body. You just think it. And next thing you know, you're doing fine. And so like that kind of attitude carried over into the other things we do in life that we're not even aware the level of ways that our mind and our mindset is messing us up, like in the creative space. I mean, this is very, having this conversation for you is sparking a lot of thought to me. So I appreciate this, man.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. And it's like voting a cast for yourself of the kind of, it's casting a vote for the kind of person that you want to be, right? When you wake up and do something hard each day, you're like, you can do hard things. And yeah, it really does shift. It's exactly like what you're talking about. Like when you're in this freezing cold and you're focusing on the warmth, right? I put my hands on my legs and I focus on the feeling of the warmth between my hands and my knees. And I think happiness, it kind of just shows that happiness is where you put your mind, and you can be sitting in there voluntarily suffering and not realizing it. You can be having an exchange with an artist that you're working with or a client, and you're like, oh, this sucks, this is awful, that client, but it's actually just where you put your mind, and you don't have to suffer in the way that you think you do. And I think a lot of us, I mean, the grumpy audio engineer is just the cliche for a reason, because there's a lot of audio engineers that are incredibly grumpy. And I've been working with a lot of grumpy audio engineers in my past, Academy Award winners who will punch the mixing console because Pro Tools is taking 2 seconds to lock up instead of 1, And I had this moment where my mum was having brain surgery a few years ago, and we thought she was going to die. And I was sitting there at work, and I was just like thinking about my mum on this operating table with a surgeon who's literally saving her life, right? And there was a mixing engineer that punched a Lexicon 480 because it just wasn't working. And it was a great moment for me, because it was just like, wow, we're so caught up in our own minds that we think that is a problem. We think that matters. And if you can shift your perspective by doing these practices that we do, life just flows so much easier. And the art that you make flows easier with less restriction, with less ego. You can allow the art to be what it is. And if you can get your kind of mind out of the equation and just allow what's coming out of your speakers to actually tell you the truth, I think it just creates much better art. Whereas if you're trying to tell the speakers what's coming out of it rather than what actually is coming out of it, I think that really hinders the art, and it makes for worse sounding records. It makes for worse interactions with clients. But allowing things to be as they are, and then I think instead of competing with the universe but collaborating with it, that's where great art is made, I believe.
That's brilliant, man. Boy, you're sparking a lot of ideas for me. So I'll go backwards if I can remember them all. But the last thought I had was the difference between rough mix and now I'm going to mix it. So you're familiar with that, right? So you track, especially for me, I mean, it could be anything we're doing, but when I'm tracking a band, or if I go into the studio with my band, usually I just sound check everything, and then I'm not actually in the control room listening to the takes go down. So I don't have that instant rapport with myself or the other musicians about the parts and the sound and everything. And a lot of it is, I try and get lost in the music, which is a wonderful experience because it's what I want to be doing during that. I want to be a player. And then I come in and let's do the rough mix. And then I sort of discover what it's sounding like. And I'll often find it very challenging to reconcile where that rough mix goes, which often I love. There's a lot that I love about the rough mix, but that all that years of experience as an engineer and a producer, it's very hard to shut that off and not be like, oh yeah, but oh man, I can get this to sound so much. Oh boy, those drums can cut through so much that, you got to carve it up and do all these things. And then sometimes we do all that, and then you go back, and if you're lucky, you go back and check the rough mix again, and you're like, oh shit, I lost all the vibe that I had in the rough mix. How do I get back? How do I do my trickery, but also get the vibe back? So that's one of the things. And then the other thought that I had was this idea of ways that the places where we experience a perspective shift in music. And I think early on for me, it was it's that if you think back, like you loved Nirvana, but with that, I'm sure there was, but that other thing, that other kind of music, that hair metal or whatever it was at the time for you, you might've been, yeah, but that's lame, man. That pop music sucks. And then years later, you go back, especially as a craftsman of music, somebody who's producing and mixing. And because you get experience in all these other places, you go back and you rediscover the old music. And then you're like, oh shit, that's pretty cool, man. I never really looked at it that way before. And it's that rediscovery, and it's like nothing more than a perspective shift, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that happens to me all the time. The more that I've kind of like grown and evolved as a person, I realized that a lot of those things that I didn't like back in the day was because I was kind of caught up in my own ego and my own mind. Like I'm not going to listen to. What's a good example of something that I've discovered in later years? I don't know. There's probably certain like 90s pop songs, right? That now that I listen to, I was like, man, that's a pretty good song, But back in the 90s, right, I was listening to like a lot of West Coast punk bands from LA, all the Bad Religions and Good Riddance and Strung Out and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
And if it was polished and sounded good, then I probably didn't like it. But I think that was more because I was just caught up in my own identity. I was caught up in this thing that it's like, I'm a punk rocker. I can't listen to anything that's pop. I'm at the point now where I don't believe in guilty pleasures. Like I'm just going to listen to music and I'm either going to like it or I don't, but I'm not going to like label something as good or bad because I think everything's so much more nuanced than that. And I listen to a wide array of music. I still listen to punk rock, but I listen to a lot of Iron and Wine and Bon Iver, but I also listen to Tracy Chapman and Janis Joplin or Sam Cooke. I'll listen to System of a Down or Deftones. Like there's so many different forms of art. And I think all of it's just as valid as a Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande in the same way that like a Lars von Trier film like Melancholia is just as valid as the Transformers, like there's music that's designed to make you shake your booty, and there's music like Jeff Buckley to sit there and like kind of contemplate the poeticism of it. And I think being able to, sorry, there's some car alarm going off down the road. I don't know if that's coming through.
All we see is just, we're just so immersed in this philosophy of discussion we're having here, and then that view behind you. We don't hear car alarms anymore. We tune them out. They don't even exist. It's like the Matrix for us right now. Amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? It's just like, it's just being able to appreciate art for what it is. And I think there's a lot of work that goes into all forms of art. And I can appreciate almost anything these days because I know the process and I know how much work goes into it. Maybe I don't like it all. Maybe there's songs that I hear, I'm just like, no, I don't really like that. It doesn't resonate with me, but I'm still going to appreciate it. I'm going to still appreciate that there's a person behind that creating the art. But you were talking about the roughs as well, and the roughs versus the mixes. And man, maybe you're just much better at this job than I am, because when I'm in the studio and I'm creating like a rough, I'm just like, this sounds great. This sounds cool. And I'll have an artist that say, oh, I can't wait to hear it when it's mixed. I'm like, what do you like? It sounds great. Like, but every single time that I mix it, I don't really go back and listen to the roughs. It always sounds better. To me, I'm always just like doing my thing. But there was this period last year where I had like 3 projects in a row that I was producing, where went through and produced the artists, got it sounding great for the rough, sent it off to them, and then went and mixed it. And all 3 of these artists were like, I preferred the rough. And I remember at the time being like, man, have I just gotten really bad at mixing? Is that the problem? But what I realized was actually I was just getting much better at producing and tracking that, like, it was just sounding great. And I didn't need to do as much. I think it's very, very easy to think that just because we've got a tool, we need to use the tool. And I think that's where it comes back to just listening, actually listening to your speakers, not just like slapping an SSL channel strip on it because that's what Tom Lord Algae or CLA do, It's like you don't just boost 15 dB of 16K because you've seen it on a mix with a masters video. It's actually doing it because something needs it. And I think that's where I noticed last year. I was kind of like, I was going through this period of just getting so habitual in what I was doing with things that I wasn't actually listening to what the song actually needed. And it was a great refresher. It was a great lesson to be like, no, just listen more. Actually listen to what's coming out the speakers, and then you'll actually make better sounding mixes. Not because, you saw this on a YouTube video or mix with the masters, but because that's what the track's actually telling you to do. So yeah, it's man, we never stop learning in this job, right?
Right. Yeah, no, it's one of the fun things about it. And, again, it's that being on the journey, not at the destination. Shall we jump over and take a look at your studio too? I want to sort of see, I love all this talk, but let's share a little bit about, hold on, I got to see if I can get this to pop up for me. Let's share a little bit about, where actually you're doing this and making these songs so that everybody can see it, because it's a really beautiful, beautiful place. And I don't know if we'll hear sounds or music or anything like that, but you see that? Are you getting that on your end, Toby?
Yeah, I'm seeing that.
Yeah. So Rockstars, check this out. I mean, first of all, nice work with the website and the videography and stuff like that. Feel free to just talk over this while we're looking at this stuff. What prompted you to set up your website this way? What are we looking at? And there's your buddy in the mirror there.
Yeah, so he's actually a session musician that I use from time to time that filmed it. But yeah, this is my rooftop recording studio in Wellington, and it's like up on top of a building overlooking the Parliament. So it's like right in the heart of the city. And it's basically me in the room with, a whole bunch of vintage synths and guitars and drum kits. That's a 1967 Sonar teardrop kit. And so this studio I discovered about a year ago. I was looking for a new space to work from because previously I was working from a studio that I built off my house. And this studio came available. And as soon as it came available, I don't think anybody was crazy enough to, do a long-term lease of a recording studio in Wellington in 2025, But, I was dumb enough to take over it, and it's been amazing. It's got a whisper quiet vocal booth, which also doubles as like an amp room.
Right. So it was a sort of a little bit of a walk-in studio situation.
Yeah. So it was, the booth was already there, but basically nothing else. So I built everything else and, pulled up all my equipment and all that kind of stuff. And I've really set it up in a way that like workflow and efficiency is key, because I've worked in, some of the biggest recording studios in New Zealand. I used to be the house engineer to a 220 square meter recording studio that had both a Neve and an SSL, 2 different control rooms that you could choose which console you wanted to record from, with a whole bunch of vintage equipment. But what I noticed about that was bands would just sit there as would be like setting up the drum kit, and it would take 4 or 5 hours to get everything ran out there, all the mics put on the kit and all the guitar amps and all that kind of stuff. It just took forever to actually go from like coming in and getting set up to actually recording. So my whole process with this studio was I wanted to make sure that everything was mic'd up, patched up, ready to go at all times. So there's never any patching. Basically, every single microphone and instrument has its own dedicated preamp, compressor, EQ. So when I'm producing records, which I produce a lot of bands, but I also produce a lot of solo artists, and a lot of the solo artists that I produce, they might not play a single instrument. So it's me creating everything, right? And so if I want to be like, hey, I want to record some electric guitar, I literally just plug in my guitar, the mic's already on the amps, the preamps are all patched up, ready to go. I record the guitar in 2 takes, and then I'm like, cool, I want to jump on the drum kit, and I go and jump on the drum kit, the mic's already on there, all patched up, I literally play the thing, jump back onto the console, and then I'm like, I want to add some Juno, and I just turn on the Juno and start playing. So I think a lot of people are really, really blown away by the fact that when they come into my studio at 9:30 in the morning, by 10 o'clock in the morning, we're recording drums. And I think a lot of people are resonating with that because they've been to a lot of studios where it just takes, until lunchtime, till after lunch before you actually start doing your first takes. And so to me, the whole thing really is going from kind of concept to actually execution as quickly as possible, because sometimes when we're in this industry, we get really, really focused on the technical. We get focused on maybe we should use like a Audix i5 instead of a SM57 on the snare,
Right.
Who cares? I would much rather an artist actually just go and execute an idea and we just tweak it however we need to afterwards. And I mean, in saying that, I've chosen all the best equipment that I can for every single instrument.
Rock stars, are you ready to unlock the full potential of your mixes and masters? Then you need iZotope Ozone 12. This complete tool set gives you 20 pro modules, including the new bass control, unlimiter, and stem EQ, plus the IRC5 maximizer for loud, clean mixes and masters without distortion, including the new mastering assistant that guides, not decides, so you are always in control. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. Setting up your own drum kit in a studio like that, you have an opportunity, hopefully you do, to kind of arrive at how you want to mic the kit in that space.
Yeah.
So maybe actually talk about that a little bit, because that can be challenging when you're playing the drums yourself, right?
Yeah, it can be really, really challenging. I've basically just set it up so everything sounds great as what it is. And like I've really kind of dreamed up what the perfect chains are for everything. So like on the overheads of the drum kit, I've usually got an AEA R88, which is like a stereo ribbon mic. And then like that's going into like a Buzz Audio MA 2.2 preamp, which is like really, really great, really clean and really beautiful for ribbons. And then that's going into like a pair of kind of stereo Pultecs going into a Chandler Xena limiter. So it's like, the perfect overhead chain, right?
Wow.
It's like, the same for like the kick drum and the snare drum. They're going through like a pair of Neves going into DBX 160s, going into like a Neve EQ, the 8802, I think. And so everything is really dialed in. Like even the EQs are dialed into where that mic position is and what the microphone is. So it means that I can actually just jump on the drum kit and just record and know that it actually sounds great as it is. I don't need to tweak anything. I don't need to move anything. We might have drummers that want to change out the snare drum. Like at the moment, there's like a Ludwig Black Beauty that generally just lives on the kit. And a Black Beauty sounds great in 90% of situations, but maybe we want to swap it out for a super sensitive or something like that. But
thank you for reminding me to go get that Black Beauty, because I'm just going to use it on everything.
Oh man, the 6.5 inch as well. It just sings. It absolutely sings. And
so I think it's like 6.5 is the extra deep, right?
It's
like
that's
5.5 versus 6.5.
Yeah. And so I think it's just like really just dreaming up what is the best chain. And, like that's from years of experience of knowing the right positionings and knowing like what preamps work on best equipment. On each equipment. And then I think like at that point, there's so much that you can do in the box. Like if you've got a snare mic'd up by a 57 going into a Neve, going into an EVQ, going into a DBX, and it sounds bad, it's probably not the fault of the chain, right? It's probably like the snare tuning or the playing. And so I think that's where I'm at with the studio, is like the way it's set up is everything sounds great. And there's so much that you can do in the box to just reshape those things to actually just get them to sit better in the track. And I would rather do that and have ideas flowing really, really quickly than getting caught in the technical, because so often we can, like I remember I was up in Auckland at this recording studio where we had the producer of Queens of the Stone Age, like clockwork, and amazing producer engineer. And we spent 8 hours just getting the snare drum sounding right. And the snare drum sounded amazing by the end of it, but the band was so tired and they were so, like by the end of it, they weren't creative. They weren't really feeling like they wanted to lay down drums because we'd spent so long on a snare drum getting that right. And sure, the snare drum sounded amazing, but I would rather spend 30 minutes and just get it sounding like really, really good as we can, and just move on, keep the ideas flowing,
Yeah. Now, but isn't that an opportunity where that's one where you want to have enough time where you come back tomorrow and now it's all set up or something? But it is a tricky balance because, everything is so relative in the studio and in the moment, that even just getting something right and then saying, okay, now we'll come back tomorrow and it'll be just right. It's like me doing this podcast. Then you come back tomorrow and you're like, why is it not working, right now? So it is a challenging thing. And then now let's see, how do I want to ask this? Arriving at a couple of things. One is finding that drum sound that you liked. You have experience recording other people. You play drums too. I'm always amazed when I play drums. Two things. One is when a really good drummer sits down at the same kit that I was just playing and they hit it, I'm like, God, why does the snare sound so big when he hits it, versus me? And that's just all that experience too. But I also notice the opposite sometimes. I'm like, when I get in there and mess around, I realize, there's this vast array of possible directions I could take this beat and the sound and the way I play it and all that. And, it can open your eyes to, that what you grapple with as an engineer when somebody else is playing and you're sort of internally blaming yourself for why the drums don't sound right. And it's really the drummer just isn't doing the thing, or maybe you don't have the right match, What thoughts have you learned about that from both being a player and then trying to record somebody else and get it to sound great?
Man, it's a hard thing. And sometimes it's not the thing that we think it is. Sometimes we're like, we're working on a mix and we're like, oh man, the drums don't feel good. And it's not the drums, it's the guitar. The guitar's rushing,
right.
And it makes it, or the vocal is overly sibilant and it's kind of, the hi-hats are just kind of competing with it or something like that. I think this is why I don't like using like amp simulators or like recording a DI and then being like, oh, we'll just fix it later. Because to me, the way that we create records is we build on top of what's already there. And so when we make a choice at the start and we record the drums and we record the bass, we're dialing in those sounds based on what we want that to sound, right, at that point in time. And then everything that we add on top of that is based on what's already there. So if we're shaping the guitar tone, we're shaping that in the studio based on how the drums and bass are sitting. And then we go and, add keys and percussion and vocals and stuff like that. If we're using amp sims and then we come back and we're like, oh, let's swap out to a different mic, or a different impulse or like a different cabinet or whatever. That kind of, to me, feels like you're building a house and then deciding to move the kitchen afterwards. It's, like all of those decisions you make are based on what's there in the moment. And so I try to commit as much as I can. I try to get things to sound as good as possible, like with those chains that I've got. And like I do EQ quite hard going into it because I would rather EQ hard going into the recording, because that's how it's going to sound, like as close as I can to the final record. So then I'm going to continue to make better choices, right? If I record without any EQ or without, the right mics in place, I'm going to have to do so much heavy lifting afterwards, which is going to affect everything else. Because if we go and like drastically change the drum sound after we've recorded it, then all of those decisions we've made on the guitars, the bass, don't make as much sense. So yeah, I think it is actually important for me to get those sounds sounding as good as possible. And maybe that just means you take an extra 10 minutes to really make sure the tuning of the kit is right. Like, especially if you're recording a hard hitting drummer, right? The tuning of the snare drum is going to drift like quite a lot within each take.
Yeah.
And so sometimes what I'll do is even record the drummer, like we'll get the drums sounding right. We'll get them sounding really, really good. And then we'll record some one shots. And then after we've done each take, we'll just listen to those one shots, hit the snare and make sure that it's actually still sounding right. Because then if we're going to go through and do like comps of the drums, you'll hear the snare tone actually change between the different takes if you're not actually making sure that the snare is right. So even just little things like that help you get that consistent tone, that great sounding drum performance. But yeah, like you say, if you're recording a bad drummer,
let me ask you about that. Let me get clarity on that. So you record the one shots, and then you have that even when you're doing multiple passes of the drums, you have that somewhere where you can listen to that and then listen to what the snare sounds now, and then keep tuning it to get close to that. And so do you just leave it on the same drum tracks, just on a playlist? Or do you sort of have it at the beginning and then punch in and continue on each track?
Yeah, so what I'll typically do is record it like right at the start of the song, like before the song comes in, right? Just have the hit. And then every time I create a new playlist, I'll often do the, shift control option /. So it creates a duplicate of that playlist rather than a new playlist. So then it's got that sitting there at the start so we can listen to it and then we can just like punch in after that.
Right, and then you would pick up on it right away if it didn't match up. You'd be like, oh, I think we lost it. That's cool. It's like having a tuning reference. And the other reason for doing that trick that you talk about, Rockstars, is if you're on a click track to record, and so you've already done a count for the song once, then the drummer doesn't have to keep counting. And then every time you start, it's always going to start the song in the right place. People don't have to you don't have to be sweating the pre-roll in the same way, and you don't have to worry about bands don't have to be counting how many bars of click before we go. They just hear that count off and go. Especially if there's a band playing and tracking together. Howdy Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, aka the second half of the show. And my guest today is Toby Lloyd, joining us from Tiny Triumph Studios in Wellington, New Zealand. Actually, he's at home right now, but what a view. So Toby, are you ready to jam, dude?
I'm ready to jam, man.
All right, groovy. So let's see. I want to talk to you a little bit about more. I want to lead off with your music too. So the new single, Come On Home, is one you're working on now, which you were excited about. How did you record that one? And there's also particularly like horns and vocals that I made a note of. I just wondered, horns and organ is what I meant. And then also you sort of figured, you found your voice, and you either you naturally found it or intentionally, but you sort of went for a little bit of a breathy vocal kind of approach. And I wondered if that was intentional. And with that question, you made the point once before of, how did you say it? You had a word that you used to describe being a punk rocker and sort of shying away from other music. But there's something about that too, where I guess my question is, how do you feel about those moments when we have to embrace a style for a song? Because we don't want to make music where we don't know what we're doing, what it is. It kind of helps if we just decide I'm going for something, right? How do you feel about all that?
Yeah,
those are a lot of questions all at once.
No, that's all good. Yeah, it's funny because like the types of music that I listen to have never really been the types of music that I've been able to make. For whatever reason, it's like, I listen to punk rock and I love listening to that. But when I pick up a guitar, I don't write punk rock, I just write. Probably more because, I've got 5 kids, and the house is very hectic, right? And so when I'm kind of playing off in a corner, I'm typically singing quite softly because it's like there's enough noise going on in the house that I don't want to have to like project, and there's enough chaos going on. So I think partly that's why my vocals on this album are quite breathy and quite kind of subdued. I think it's a mixture between, it's just like a muscle memory thing. I've had to like sing quietly because there's so much noise going on in the house. But also I love singers like Iron and Wine, Sam from Iron and Wine, like they're real kind of like sensitive soul vocal. And so I think I just found that when I was belting, it just didn't feel natural because I wasn't used to belting, because I try and sing quietly so the kids aren't gonna hear it. And as well, because like a lot of the songs are about my partner, and she's might be kind of floating around the room, so I might be kind of singing softly because
you want to surprise her.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think it's just like a muscle memory thing, and just after experimenting in the studio, just trying to find where my vocal sits right. And I kind of arrived at that place. And I listen to a lot of Iron and Wine, and I love his kind of quite breathy vocals. They feel very, very intimate. And this is a very intimate record as well. And so I kind of went through the process of, I've got my studio set up, everything's wired up, ready to go at any moment. And I went through the process of sitting there, and I'd be like, okay, I'll give myself 20 bars of click track so I can hit record, run into the booth, put my headphones on, get the guitar right, all mic'd up, and then play the guitar, do a take, and be like, oh, damn, come out, hit stop, come back and do another one. I've gotten very, very good at just doing like one take, and it's like, that's good enough. But nice. When it came to vocals, it was just a nightmare because like I was having to just do like multiple takes of running in and out of the booth. And so over time of kind of getting frustrated with that process, now I've set up my vocal booth with a screen, a keyboard, and a mouse. So I actually don't have to leave the vocal booth, and I can literally just do like takes of like certain lines or whole verses or whatever, and just do take.
That's the way to go, man.
Again, like what we talked about earlier, like getting the technical out of the way so you can just be creative. It's so important. And so, I play everything on the record myself. Guitars, drums, bass, a lot of pianos, vocals. But I can't play saxophone or trumpet,
Right.
And I can play organ, but not to the level that you need to, where you're like sliding the drawbars or like changing the speeds. So I've got some very, very good friends that are also incredible musicians that I would just basically try and plot out in my head where the songs need to go. So there's like cello on the record, there's going to be violin on the record, and I'm just kind of really trying to tailor the songs based on what's needed. And and so that for this first song, Come Home Darling, like there's saxophone and trumpet from incredible musicians from Wellington that I've worked with a lot in the past. There's organ from one of my favorite soul artists in Wellington as well. He came into the studio, just laid down some organ. And the cool thing about that is you can only come up with your own ideas, right? When you're sitting there in the studio and you're working on your own music, it's very, very easy just to put in everything yourself and just make all of these ideas yourself. But they're all going to sound just like you. And it kind of leaves little room for this like three-dimensionality of musical ideas. And I love the prospect of bringing someone else in and just being like, I'm not going to tell you what to play. Just play and see what happens. And inevitably what ends up happening is they play something. I'm like, oh, it's not quite right. And let's steer in this direction. But it always ends up something better than what I had in my own mind, especially for someone that's actually great at saxophone and trumpet and organ. It's so instinctual to them that they can just play stuff. Whereas for me, I'm probably going to be thinking through the lens as a guitarist that it needs to be like this. And I think also having people on your own record adds an extra energy to it. I'm a very like energetic person and kind of like feeling energy, right? And having these people bring their kind of like love and care into your records as well actually just makes me enjoy the record more, because it's not like I'm just listening to my record now. It's also their record too. And that makes it far more interesting and satisfying to me. It really was just a case of just going into the studio and just hammering out the record. Now, this first single, when I first recorded it, it was about 10 BPM slower than what the final thing ended up becoming. And I went into the studio and I recorded it at a period of time where maybe I didn't have a lot of energy, or maybe I was going through like, I don't know, a phase. And then I sat with the song for 6 months. I'm like, man, it's not feeling right. It's just not feeling right. And then one day I just grabbed pitch and time and just sped it up 10 BPM. And I'm like, oh God, that feels so much better. That feels way better now. And so then I went through the process of having to re-record everything. And that's happened to 4 songs on this album where I've speed changed it by like more than 5 BPM and then had to go through and re-record it.
Are you ready to launch your career in the audio or entertainment business? SAE Institute Nashville, right here in the heart of Music Row, offers hands-on programs to prepare you for the industry. From studio production and live sound to audio for film and a whole lot more. You'll learn by doing working with professional-grade gear alongside experienced industry pros. If you're more into the business side of entertainment, SAE's Entertainment Business Program teaches essential basics like contracts and promotion to help you navigate the industry. With diploma, associate, or bachelor's degrees, there's a path for everyone. Plus, Career Services supports graduates as they take the next step. Want to see it for yourself? Immerse yourself in Nashville's exciting music scene and book a tour today at nashville.sae.edu or call 615-244-5848. I did that recently. We came back from tracking, and when I got back to the studio, I realized I was like, it just something about it. And then I was like, and I sped it up a little bit and found, and then you go too far and then come back. And I just used the built-in in Pro Tools. And you're working in Pro Tools? Yeah. So I used that, and I was pretty struck by how well that could work, but but I didn't have the option to re-record it at the new tempo either. Have you tried just speeding stuff up versus letting that be an exploratory tool that indicates what you should do when you go back and re-record? And do you have any comments on how those two things can work?
Yeah, it's hard. There's been quite a few records that I've produced that have been too slow. There's also been records that I've produced that have been too fast. And there's something about BPM, right, that you feel it. You might not want to admit it, but you just feel it. And you increase it by 1 ppm and you're like, oh, my heart feels better now. I can breathe easier at night. Yeah. And there's definitely been records that I've, I typically spend 2 days on each song for all the artists that I produce. And so we'll go on and we'll spend a whole day recording everything. And then I'll, run home, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, listen to it. And I'm like, oh God, it's 2 BPM too slow. And so in those instances, I'll come in and I'll speed change it and I'll listen through. And if it sounds fine, I'll probably use it. I'll never use that for drums, just because I think with multi-miking drums, it can just create phase problems and it can just get all warpy and stuff like that. So I'll go through and warp it. Either that, or if it's slower, often I will literally just go through and edit the drums manually by hand. And it's a lot easier to do that when it's slower out and just hit, every single beat, just beat, nudge, cut, nudge, cut, nudge. So I'll do that for drums. Maybe I'll do that for bass if the bass playing is more legato stuff. But if it's more rhythmic stuff, then I'll just go through and replay it. Like I said before, I've got to the point now where I think I create all of my parts to be in a style that I can just do a single take, and it's got everything that I need in there. So if I have to replay everything, it usually doesn't take that long. I just listen to the idea, jump back into the studio, quickly play the guitar part, listen to the drums, play it, It's heartbreaking though. It's heartbreaking to put that much work into a track and then be like, oh damn, it's too slow. But you've got to do it. And you've got to surf the art.
There's an amazing amount of that we have to do in the studio too. It's one of the tough lessons at the beginning is learning to work really hard on something, and then the next very next move is the delete button. It's just really tough to do, and I guess it helps to get comfortable with the process versus the result. Sometimes that's just the only way to arrive at the correct answer with something.
Yeah, and I think working on the Hobbit films and stuff like that really helped understand that, because we'd be working on a reel, a 15 to 20 minute reel, and they'd be mixing it, and all the sound editors and designers would be cutting all the sounds, making it perfect, as good as possible. And then we'd come into work the next day and they'll be like, oh, they've made 180 conforms, picture changes to this reel that you're currently mixing. And you can either try and patch over all those points and, do all the fades and, change all the automation to work, or you can just mix it from scratch. And I think actually that's a beautiful practice of surrender, just being you've just got to do what you've got to do to make the art right. And, some of that means that I've spent an extra day in the studio on a track that, I maybe didn't have the time for, but you've just got to do it, because at the end of the day, nobody in this world cares how long something takes. They only care how it makes them feel. And if you're working with an artist and you're the song is going to feel better, 2 BPM faster, but we've got to redo all this work, it's worth doing it in my opinion, because when it comes out, that's how it is. And if people would feel better and resonate with it more, then you just got to do it, And people don't care how much something costs. They don't care how long something takes. They just care how it makes them feel.
Yeah, that's great advice. And then, another part to that is this concept was like, well, you're going to do something the next day. You're either going to work just as hard on another song, or you could just work just as hard on this song one more time and maybe you'll nail it, But it's a lot. And then the other part of that is, there's also this trade-off when we build music one brick at a time. We don't know how it comes together until we get it all going. And the flip side of that is when we can track with a band or a rhythm section, enough of one to really identify quickly what the feel is going down. And if we keep our ass in the producer's seat, then we get to have that immediacy of response, that feedback loop that says like, it's just not feeling right. Try it again. And then the band can make a band can shift tempos and try another take much faster than having to rebuild the whole track. But it's that balancing act of like, which one is right for the result and the situation. I got lots more to say on that topic, but
yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to listening, right? Like what we were talking earlier, just learning to listen better. And I think especially like as a producer, I don't know if you experience this, but typically when I'm producing a band and engineering at the same time, the first couple of takes, I'm so focused on the technical. I'm so focused on like the sounds and, the levels in which everything's coming in and, the amount of gain reduction on the compressors that sometimes it's easy to maybe not notice the BPM, or maybe not notice the key as well. And so actually the first couple of takes really just focusing on the technical. And then it's like by take 3, it's like, okay, cool. Now let's actually listen. And sometimes it's take 3 that I'm like, let's try a different tempo. Let's try a different key. And so you've just got to get those technical things out of the way so you can be creative. But I think learning how to listen better and really sit there. And I think when you listen better and you can feel it in your chest, you can feel that something's just not right. And I think the more that you practice like being present and being in the moment, it does open yourself up to understand what's going wrong in a song a lot quicker than if you just get so caught up in the ego.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because at the same time, you need a little bit of ego, right? Because it's music. It's rock and roll. It's attitude. You want some of that sometimes. But the to that point too is this thing that I remember sort of learning early on, which is the process of creating in the studio is it's like a collective of zoom levels, right? You're either zoomed way in, and you're familiar with this when you're working in Pro Tools. You're either zoomed way in and you're looking at the waveform up close, or you're zoomed way out and you can see like the arrangement of the song as I punch the mic. And in the listening, it's the same thing, right? You can either be zoomed in with what you're working on as an engineer or a musician, but when you have somebody who's producing, hopefully they're zoomed out and hearing it in the zoomed out context at the same time, but you can never be in 2 zoom settings at the same time. I mean, I guess with 2 screens, you kind of can in a studio, but like as an experience musically, you kind of have to just accept that you're in one place or the other. And, you made that comment about you need to be a better listener. And it's like, there's the experience of listening in the headphones when you're playing the part, which is different. I know you know this. You hear stuff differently than when you play it and the speakers and you're separated from it. You have a new zoom perspective,
That's why the car test is so important, right? You don't have the visual cues taking up all of your information, and then your brain has more bandwidth. I mean, it's the same thing if you go and see a live band, right? You go and see a live band, and you've got smoke machines and you've got people bumping into you and heat and you've got like loud sound coming towards you and the smells and all that kind of stuff. And you'll be like, this band sound amazing. God, they're so tight. You go and stand at the back of the room where no one's bumping into you, where you can't smell the smoke machines, and you close your eyes and you'll hear all the wrong notes. You'll hear the drummer rushing the snare. And it means that you've got more bandwidth to just focus on your ears. And I think the same is definitely true when you're producing a record, where it's easy to get so kind of overwhelmed by everything that's happening, right? Like when you're producing a band, you're not just zoomed into, the Pro Tools screen, or like you're not just focusing on the drum part. You're also focusing on the energy in the room. Like do the band feel comfortable? You know, have they got enough snacks? Have they had enough coffee?
Is this edit taking too long? You know?
Yeah. Is the diplomacy in the unit tight, and is communication effective enough? Is the temperature right in the there's so many things to focus on that it's very, very easy to lose the BPM of the song because there's just all of these other aspects. And to me, I think I put a lot of energy into or a lot of focus into how the energy in the room feels. Like, do the band feel comfortable? Because no musician is ever going to get the best out of themselves if they're feeling tense, if they're feeling like pressured, if they're feeling like they're unheard. So I think part of the focus on my studio has always been to make sure that it's client first, right? To make sure that at the end of the day, it's their song. When the song goes out onto Spotify, it's got their name in bold. Often it won't even have my name on it at all, you know? So I can have an opinion on what's going to make something better. But if that goes against how the artist actually feels about the process, then I'm going to let them take that win. I would rather, the snare drum be a sound that they prefer than I prefer, if it means that they feel heard and understood. Because I think what happens with a lot of producers is they just shoot down artists. They're like, no, we're not going to try that idea. And the thing is, like, no one actually knows how to make a hit record, right? Everyone...
Not even the hit record makers.
Exactly. Even Max Martin, right? He's only got 22 or 23 number one hits or something like that. But he's written hundreds of songs. So there is no formula to make a hit. And so I think as soon as producers think that they are like the gospel of knowledge around like what is the right thing to do, I don't think that there's a truth in that. You can have a good instinct and you can have good taste, and that's presumably why artists come to you in the first place, because of your opinion, because of your taste. And
a large vocabulary, a large musical vocabulary of experience.
Yeah, exactly. But if an artist has a belief in something and they're like, no, I want the vocal to be, down here in the mix, and you're like, no, it has to be here. It's like, who knows? There are a lot of great records that kind of sound, from a sonic perfection point of view, like crap. They might run the mix through a cassette tape 6 times just to get the wobble right and the noise right. And from a fidelity point of view, you might be like, that sounds awful, but it's the vibe, it's the artistic intent. And so I think as producers, we really are just musical midwives. We're there to help deliver the artist's baby and have it come out as their baby, not your baby. So I think that's really the focus for me, is to try and like suggest ideas, try and help them elevate their dreams, but also really listen to what it is that they want and make sure that they feel heard and seen, and like they've got a producer that's working on their team, as opposed to someone that's just like, I don't know, like a dictator or a tyrant in the studio. I don't think that creates good art.
Do we also eat granola and smoke pot in the delivery room while we're doing this? Or is that, am I just taking the midwifery a little too far?
Is that the stereotypical midwife?
No, I just made that up. We actually had a midwife for my daughter's birth, and we had a home birth too, which was totally amazing. And,
wow.
She was incredible, and she had, I think she had a midwife in training. I don't think we had a doula, but my daughter's mom, my ex, she became a doula later, and so I learned what all that stuff was. But I think that's great, man. And there's a lot of ways for us to learn to defer to the artist we're working with and defer to the band. And I know, one of the practices I like to do is just simply learn to defer, but learn to don't shut down your idea and don't shut down your voice. Just share it with the band. Say like, hey, would you like to, if I hear something, would you like me to bring it up? And a lot of times the band's like, oh yeah, great. Well, here's what I'm noticing. And then you just offer it to them. It's almost like a gift. You give it to them so that it can be their decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's where removing the ego from the process, right? Like, who cares if it's your idea or they think it's their idea when it was actually yours? It doesn't matter. No one actually cares, right? And so I think like a lot of the way that I frame my ideas is, this might be a terrible idea. This might ruin the song, and already you're setting their expectations really, really low. So then they're like, okay, let's listen to the shit idea. And then you say it, and then they're like, okay, actually that's not a bad idea. And even just like setting their expectations really, really low means that you can actually, I don't know, have it be more favorable. Whereas if you come in there being like, the song needs to be like this, it needs to have this, and then maybe they don't feel as strongly towards it, you've already set their expectations too high. So sometimes managing expectations in the studio is a great way to get your ideas across as well.
Yeah, good idea. So let me jump to this, one of your records, Macho Macho Blink. That's got like this really cool intro effects going on in the song, sort of really tight bass and drums. I was curious if you had recorded or mixed that. And then, what are your thoughts about getting that kind of very locked in sound tonally, performance-wise, but also tonally, sonically, it's very locked in and tight feeling.
You know how we were talking about earlier that it's like if you have like you can jump on the drum kit, it sounds crap, and then you get a great drummer that jumps on it and you're like, whoa, is that a different drum kit? That was the secret with that band. Yeah, I produced, recorded, and mixed that record. And just incredible musicians. Dane, the drummer, is he's, in my opinion, New Zealand's version of Travis Barker, just an incredible drummer with incredible flair. He doesn't just play with a lot of technicality, but he plays the song. And I think that's like a rare gift in a lot of drummers. Sometimes instead of playing the song, they play the drums. And to find drummers that really actually just play to the song's strengths is what helps a record sound like that. And so, yeah, they were just incredible musicians. We recorded that at the Massey recording studio in Wellington, which is the 220 square meter tracking room. So that's why the drums have got like the big decay. And in fact, the drums recording in that room is actually often problematic because massive wooden floors, really high ceiling, like the ceiling's probably 6 meters high. And wow. A lot of the work in the mix is to actually get the room out of the overheads. And the room mics often in that room are almost unusable unless you're playing When the Levee Breaks. And so for a tight drum sound like that, really just almost like gating the overheads to the kick and snare is going to help get that punch. But
that's cool to hear, actually, because it's a reminder too of what you said earlier, which is like, go for the moment. I can always address this later. I mean, there are some things we want to get right in the moment. There are some things where we can't, you don't want to wait till later, but you're just demonstrating that there's still quite a bit of flexibility in what you can do with the sound.
Yeah. And I think in hindsight, you make enough errors like this, where it means that you make better decisions in the future. If I was to go back in time, which, if I was to go back in time and everything in the universe was in exactly the same way, I would have made the same mistakes again and again and again. But now with hindsight, yeah, I wouldn't have chosen that studio to record that song because really it needed a tight drum sound and I would have made a better decision. And I think this is part of the reason why I've set my studio up in the way that I have, is because I've failed so many times and I've been able to learn from those failures and now set up things where I'm not making those same mistakes. So yeah, I probably wouldn't have recorded in a 220 square meter tracking room for the drums when it was like quite an upbeat kind of punky indie song. I would have chosen one of the booths off to the side and maybe it wouldn't have looked as cool on Instagram, but sonically the choice would have been a lot better. And I think that's how you learn, right? You learn from failing. You don't learn from succeeding all the time. You learn from your failures so much more.
Hey, rock stars, imagine sitting down at your DAW with 165 instruments and over 150,000 sounds to choose from. That's what Complete 15 from Native Instruments delivers, the most powerful creative tool in your studio. Inside, you'll find Contact 8, Massive X, Battery, and Guitar Rig 7 Pro, giving you everything you need to create in any genre. Plus, you'll get inspiring sampled instruments like upright bass and electric keys, along with endless expansions to keep your sound fresh. Whether you're producing hip-hop, scoring films, or creating EDM bangers, Complete 15 has you covered. Pair that with Native Instruments control keyboard and machine hardware, and you get next-level integration that makes music creation fast, fun, and seamless. Go to nativeinstruments.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. What sparks an idea to me that I've been coming to terms with too is, you said like, if I could go back and it was all the exact same setup and everything, I would have made the same mistakes. And what's fascinating to me is if we could go back and do something over and it was exactly the same, we couldn't even do the same thing. We wouldn't be able to do the same thing. This is my theory, and I'm sticking to it. And if you took any of the artists that made the biggest hits in the world, famous ones, maybe not an EDM track, but even maybe then, even something that's really sort of digitally composed. And they tried to, I think with, a performance, and they tried to capture that take and that recording of that hit song the same way. I put forward that they couldn't even do the exact same. They couldn't do it again. Because as long
as if you went back in time, this is getting pretty philosophical right now, so excuse me to the listeners. As long as if you went back in time, something was different. If you went back in time,
like you bought Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. If you went back in time and every particle in the universe, every atom, every molecule was exactly the same, it would have played out the same way 1 trillion times in a row. However, if you went back in time and something was different, then it could be different. And I think that's a great lesson that I've learned, is like when we make mistakes, rather than beating ourselves up on them, be like, I did exactly as I did and I can't change it. And if I went back in time and everything was exactly the same, it would play out the same. So now I can forgive myself. Now I can realize I just did as I did. I'm going to try and learn from those mistakes, make better decisions going forth. And I think that's where the learning from failure, but not beating yourself up, right? Because as soon as you start beating yourself up, you start becoming like a victim and woe is me and all that. Whereas if you can be like, damn, that really sucked. I don't want to make that mistake again. Let's like learn from it and move forward. I don't know. You got to do what you can to minimize suffering and like have a positive outlook,
Yeah, indeed. And I'm going to even take what you just said and offer that even if every particle in the universe was the same, it still wouldn't turn out the same. The very next moment, there's random variety that can happen in the next moment, and you're already off on a new path. So it's a fascinating thing to think about. Maybe, I don't know if it helps us make better records. It probably does, because the more out there and creative you get in your mind and thinking, the more likely you are to come up with a good idea, the next, chord, lyric, vocal note, mix, even choosing the plugin that you're going to use.
As long as you don't caught in option paralysis, right? As soon as you start getting like caught in the paradox of choice, you start overanalyzing every single choice like it could be different than what it was. Whereas if you're just like, there's this story, I don't know if you ever read because you've got do you have 2 kids or 1 kid?
I've got 1 daughter and 2 stepdaughters, yeah.
Yeah. Do you know that story about like the boy, the fox, the horse, and the mole?
No, but I like the way it starts.
Oh my God. The book is beautiful. It's one of those books that even adults should read, because there's so much like philosophical gems in there. But there's like an offshoot of it where this boy is like about to walk into a forest with his horse, and the whole forest is full of fog, and he can't see the path. He can't see where the path is going. He just can't make out the path because of the fog and the trees and all of that. And he says to the horse, he's like, I don't know where to go. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. How am I supposed to go forward? And the horse says, can you see the path directly in front of your feet? And the boy says, yes. And the horse says, just take the next step. And I think that's the case for us as creatives. Like, it's very, very easy to get overcome by all the choices we can make. Like, where is this going to go? Like, where is the end goal for the song? It's like, just do the next thing. Just do the next thing that feels right, and then do the next thing after that. And hopefully at some point along the way, you'll get to a point you're like, this feels pretty good.
Well, I was going to say, not only that, but I'm just going to venture a guess that the book was written by the mole who didn't get stepped on by the horse, because you were looking at the path right in front of you. So maybe it was all good.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, groovy. And then Ingrid and the Ministers, Boofhead, which is a great title. There's a lot of great titles in your discography. And Rockstars, we have the playlist in the show notes. Imagine that. Every episode I like to do that. So you can go check out all this great work that Toby's doing, and listen to these songs, and, go check out the website and everything too. But super punchy rock and roll with killer guitars and drums. And was that the one I was thinking of too, that that one had that sort of classic rock and roll verb snare sound on? I could be mixing that. No, that's on Shapeshifter Life. I've got that question. So, tell us about Ingrid and the Ministers, Boofhead, which is a great title. But you do have a cool distorted vocal on that one. And I wanted to ask you about ways that you explore how to get a cool sound on the vocal.
Man, honestly, that I don't know. Are you familiar with the company Massey Plugins?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're
Classic.
THC. They're THC. I don't know if you play around with that. Oh my God, that thing just kills the distortion on vocals. And that's become my go-to. I think maybe on that record, I probably ran her vocal out of Pro Tools through one of those radial reamp boxes into a hotcake guitar pedal and then into a Fender amp and just distorted it, ran it back into Pro Tools, maybe added like a delay on it or like just nudged it backwards. And I probably did that twice. I probably went through like a hotcake into an amp and then delayed it by a quarter note or a 16th or something. And then I would have done the same thing again with the dry vocal, but maybe put like a tube screamer on it into the amp. And so there's probably two different distortions through amps, and I've kind of just like nudged them backwards in time to get the delay right. But I would say as well, there's probably the Massey THC, because anytime I need a distorted vocal, that thing is just, it kills. It's such a great vibe. I use it all the time. I even use it on vocals in pop songs that just need like extra energy for the chorus, and I'll just put the blend in there so it's got like 10% of distortion and it's just sitting there. And it's just got such a distinct characteristic. I can't get that vocal tone or that distortion tone on any other plugin. It sounds incredible, that thing. And it's a shame that those plugins aren't more widely used, because they make some really, really great stuff. But yeah,
they've been around for quite a minute, man. Massey, was it? I've forgotten his first name, but they've been around for ages. Maybe.
Yeah. I've been using this stuff for like over a decade, maybe 15 years now, and really, really great. But yeah, I think that recording was actually the opposite of the Macho Macho one, where the room was too dry. The studio that we recorded in was a studio called The Surgery in Wellington, which is a like iconic New Zealand studio run by Lee Preble, who's the godfather of the music scene in Wellington. Really, really great guy and great engineer, great producer. His studio is very, very dry, and it's more set up for kind of like soul sounding records. And for big, hard hitting rock records where you want that sustain on the snare, it's not really, it's quite hard to get that. So I was definitely having to rely a lot of like room emulation on the snare drum and on the overheads to make it feel bigger and punchier and more expansive. So that was one of those records where I definitely had to work a lot harder on the drums. It was the Macho Macho was having to take the room out. This was having to put it back in. And that Shapeshifter record that you talked about, Life, that was in that big Massey recording studio as well. So that big reverb that you're hearing is actually just the room, like actually using the room mics.
It's a great sound, really nice sound. So that one you picked the right studio for sure.
Yeah. And there was that was a really, really cool record that went to #1 in New Zealand, I think. But the great thing about that was I was just engineering that. The producer, a guy called Tiki Tane, who's one of New Zealand's most beloved artists, he was the producer. And when I found out that I was going to be engineering for him, who he's had an incredible career of his own as a solo artist, I was just like, oh man, I'm just going to be like a console monkey that's just doing what he tells me. I imagined turning up to the studio and I was just going to have to push the faders the way he wanted to and EQ the things the way that he wanted to. I thought I was basically going to be like an audio tradesperson. But that was a great lesson for me in what a great producer actually does, which he turned up. There was no backseat driving. He didn't even once tell me to change anything on what I was doing on the console or anything. He was so focused on the performance and the creativity and the energy in the room that he was just like, just make it sound great. I trust you. Just do your thing. And I'm going to focus on the band. And that was really, I think, a really, really powerful lesson. Practice and surrender, practice and trust, and getting the right people for the job as well. But I've definitely worked with producers as an engineer in capacity before, where I've seen the opposite, where I've like learnt lessons where I've been like, oh man, that's what you don't do on a record, producers that communicate with the artist in a negative way, or producers that, verbally abuse the artist. I've been in situations like that before where I'm like, oh my God, like we're not saving lives here. We're just making music. It shouldn't be this this negative. It shouldn't be this stressful. Like there's enough music in the world. If no one makes another record, we've got enough music. Like if we're putting music out into the world, it should be an enjoyable experience. The artist should come away and be proud of it. And if the artist comes away from the record being like, man, I hated working on that record, then for the rest of their life, they're not going to enjoy listening to that song. So whereas if they come away from that record being like, man, I had such a great time making that record, like that was so much fun, like they're going to come back to you. They're going to be proud of the music that you made, you know? So all of those times working with other producers, I think make you a better producer as well. So yeah, any rock stars out there that are producing themselves, try and get yourself into a position where you can actually be in the studio with another producer, because you're going to learn all the things that you don't like and you're going to learn all the things that you do like. And sometimes you don't notice that because you're just in this world by yourself and you're not rubbing shoulders with other people. But man, when I worked at Park Road Post and I was with 35 other engineers, I became so much better at my craft because I was able to like soak in all this inspiration, all these skills from all these other people. But unfortunately, a lot of studios and producers don't work like that. You know, we work in our own little bubbles, own little echo chambers. And yeah, I think being able to expand your worldview on your own craft is pretty vital to be able to progress, you know?
Now, so that experience comes with being in a studio where other people are coming into the studio. So you get that as part of that experience, you know, especially if you're a house engineer and people come in and then they just ask you to do things and you get to witness it. Have you learned any good ways or tricks for those who are in home studios who they're just simply not in that kind of environment to get more of that? Do you find that it's just reaching out, opening up your home studio to allow other producers to come in and let you be their appendage for making the record to get that experience? Or have you seen other ways that people could do that?
Yeah, I think for me it started, I was up in a city called Auckland in New Zealand. I was living there for a while. And I met a good friend who was a producer, and he was better than me. He was a far better producer, far better engineer, far better mixing engineer than me, but not to the level of where Chris Lord-Alge is better than me, right? You know, like Chris Lord-Alge is just like, you know, the godfather of that sound. And so I think finding someone that was like a little bit better than me, and he didn't have a recording studio, he just had a little home mixing room. And so we just hang out, you know, I just, you know, through the circumstances in which I had, got to form a friendship with him, and I just come and hang out in his studio, and I'd watch him mix a track, and we'd just talk, and I'd be like, how'd you do that? And then we'd go and hop in the car and we'd listen to each other's mixes, and he'd be like, oh, how'd you do that? And I was like, oh, how'd you do that? And, you know, you just soak in that inspiration from one, and from, you know, someone that's like a little bit better than you. I think that's the important part, right? Like there's that sentiment, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And just surrounding yourself with people that are better than you. So if you're a home producer and you're just sitting in your own bubble, just find other people that are in your niche or in your city, and just reach out to them and be like, hey, do you want to catch up for a coffee and talk audio? Because, you know, especially a lot of people in their home studios, it's a lonely place. And so I think a lot of people are pretty receptible to having someone just come around and have a coffee and just talk about audio. And, you know, we like to geek out, you know, everybody in this industry likes to geek out. So just bring someone a coffee and go around to their studio and just talk, and just ask if you can just sit there while they're watching, mixing a track. Also, don't get butthurt if they say no. You know, some people are private people. Some people don't want to actually have people around them while they're making art. But I think by and large, a lot of people that work in home studios, they're pretty keen to catch up for a coffee and talk shop. And I think that's how you become better. I think there's so much more inspiration that comes from in-person contact. Whereas you can jump on Mix with the Masters and learn a lot of great stuff, and all the tutorials, amazing resources. I mean, I'm sure you wish they were around when you were coming up, just like me as well. I wish they were around when I was coming up. But I think there's something really to be said about being in person with someone, having that direct communication and being able to bounce ideas back and forth.
Yeah, because then you have a dialogue.
Yeah, exactly. Like you can't just ask it one question and then they answer it, and then that's the end of it. You learn from just like back and forth, right? Being like, but what happens if this? Oh, but then if that, you know, it's that's where the growth lies, I think.
Yeah, and it's a lot easier than starting a podcast and running it for 10 years to interview everybody to, you know.
Well, you've done a great job, and I'm sure you've learned a lot of lessons along the way as well.
Oh man, unbelievable. I mean, I'm the most student of all when it comes to this. And I thought I was starting a show because I knew something, initially. Which
did you ever get to? Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say it's helpful because, it's what I'm referring to now is a little bit like that topic that I've discussed previously on the show, which is sometimes it's we need to be naive to set out on this, hero's journey. Otherwise you wouldn't leave the door. You'd be like, oh, I'm not going into all that bullshit, but it's that naivete that sets us on the path to do something. And then when we're on the path, we discover what it's really all about. For me, doing the podcast was like, thinking, oh, I mean, I knew I loved it, but I also thought that I knew something. And after doing the podcast for 10 years, now I stop and I look and I'm like, holy shit, everything that I know today came from all the stuff I've learned by having these incredible interviews with so many people like yourself and just having those conversations and accumulating all the bits of knowledge. And then just, I mean, I know for me doing this that I might, if I got, 50 bits of knowledge doing an interview and 3 of them stick with me by the time I get to the studio and use it, that's still massive. It's massive opportunity. And then, you go listen again and you're like, oh shit, that other one. Oh, that's right. But it's anyway, it's great. It's been really great.
You're bang on, and you kind of like touched on the idea of messy action, right? Just do the thing. It's so easy to be like, oh, I'll wait to do the thing until I've got this piece of gear, or until I've got this studio or this piece of acoustic treatment. Just do the thing and start learning and fail and fail and fail. And I think the people that are still in this industry like yourself are the ones that almost appreciate the failure. And be like, cool, let's go and see what we're going to fail on today. There's going to be a whole lot of things to fail on, and don't like. Rick Rubin talks about that in the Creative Act, the practice of like detachment, right? Like when something unexpected happens in your life in a negative way, to be like, whoa, I didn't expect that to happen to the protagonist. I wonder what's going to happen next. And I'm sure you're the same as me. Like I never planned on getting divorced and being like a co-parent. And at the time, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. And I was kind of like spiraling in this pit of despair, being like, what? That wasn't supposed to happen to me. But I got to that point where I was like, okay, well, I'm not dead. Like, I'm still alive. Like, let's see what happens. Like, what happens next? And it led to a very, very beautiful life and a whole bunch of experiences that I wouldn't have had. And practicing that art of detachment in the studio, in your own life, and in like constantly failing as well. And not, you fail, but just don't attach that to your ego. Don't attach your failures to your sense of self. Also probably don't attach your accomplishments to your sense of self, actually just do the thing because it's fun. Just like you, when you started this podcast, I'm guessing you didn't set out to do 500 episodes. How many episodes have you done now?
Boy, this is 500 and almost 40 something, I think.
And could you imagine how intimidating that would have been when you started out to be like, I'm going to have to do 540 interviews? That's so much work. Yeah, just do the next thing, right?
That's a really good point. I've never actually thought about it from that perspective. That's a great way to view it. It's better to not know. Look, when it comes to finishing your music, nothing compares to iZotope Ozone 12. This is a complete mixing and mastering suite of tools with 20 pro modules to shape your sound. You'll find the new bass control for a tight, powerful low end, new unlimiter to restore life to overcompressed tracks, and new stem EQ so you can rebalance vocals and drums and bass without even opening the mix session. And when it's time to make your music loud, the IRC5 Maximizer gives you loud, clean mixes and masters that still sound open and clear. Save time with AI-powered workflows that keep you in the driver's seat. Ozone 12 takes the guesswork out, but you stay in control so your music translates everywhere, from streaming to stage. Go to iZotope.com and use the code ROCK10 for 10% off. I used to run. Yeah, right. Is that what you asked, run? Yeah, I used to run. I did 2.5 marathons a little over a decade ago. And that's when I sort of really got into the running. And that's when I discovered Wim Hof and cold therapy, if you want to call it that. And so I was, and I also discovered barefoot running. So all together, all at once, I decided to start running barefoot, train for a marathon, and our marathons are in April here. So if you want to do 4 months of training, which is what I decided to do, that meant I started training in January, which is out running every morning, when that's the coldest winter months we get here. Through that in February and March, it's all just lots of cold. And I would be running barefoot with no shirt on and just a pair of shorts. So I had these incredible experiences. That sounds like, you'd be like, good Lord, that's crazy. But instead I got opportunities to, wake up one morning and there's a fresh snowfall and I get all excited and I go down and run 5 miles in fresh snow barefoot and discover, not only did I not, have frostbite and lose my limbs or die of hypothermia or anything, but I did it and I, finished it and felt incredible. I could actually finish a run like that and then just sit down cross-legged in the snow, like Wim Hof, and just meditate and relax.
That's great.
It's a great
I mean, I'm into the beer. I do barefoot running as well, but I use barefoot running shoes, so it's not quite the same as being an actual barefoot. But even the barefoot running shoes when you're running on concrete for 10K or whatever is good running. But the reason why I ask is sometimes I don't know if you ever had those days where you're just not feeling it and you're just like, okay, well, I'm not going to run 10K. I'll just run to the end of the street. And you get to the end of the street and you're like, I'll just run to the end of the next street. And you get to the end of that and you're like, okay, well, let's just run a little bit further, and rather than setting those giant milestones of being like, no, I have to run to here. It's like, just run to the next, landmark. And sometimes like just doing those like bite-sized chunks can help you navigate the mental hurdles around it. Whereas sometimes when you're like overcommitting yourself mentally, sometimes it can just burn you out and you're just like, oh God, why am I doing this? And doing 500 episodes of the podcast, I'm sure is a bit like that, just do the next interview.
Well, doing the marathon training, there are a lot of takeaways for me to that, that apply to making records and everything else. One of which was discovering how it's possible to set your mind on something that seems just about impossible. Like I'd never run a marathon before. I'd done a 5K race, maybe that was the most I'd ever done as a runner, maybe run a few miles, to that point with shoes on. And then I decided I wanted to do that. And by setting a goal for yourself and then laying it all in a calendar and just planning it all out and knowing on this day, I only have to run 3 miles. On this day, I have to run 5 miles. On this day, I have to run 3. And then, every Saturday, you just add 1 mile onto the long run. And then after 4 months of doing that, you get to the end. Now, there were more lessons I learned too, because I didn't make it to the full marathon the first year. I had my sights on that. And at a certain point, I was running and I was having to carry like 0 shoes where I'd like, my feet hurt so much. I had to put these, it was just a piece of, it was a piece of rubber with string on it that would hold it onto my foot. And I'm kind of like flopping down the path. And that would help me like kind of survive it a little bit. But no amount of reading, Born to Run or being excited about the Tarahumara Indians, no amount of drinking the Iskiate drink that's like, what was it? Lime.
Is it chia seeds, was it?
Chia seeds and honey and water, was gonna do the trick. Although that really did help, And so finally I just hit the point. I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to have to decide to run the half marathon. And I'm kind of, in a way, I'm kind of glad that the 2 options exist and not, there isn't a 20 mile marathon or a 25 mile one you can run, where you're just this close to finishing, but you don't. Because once I did that, then I had done the training for the really long one. And then I was able to kind of nail the half marathon. And when I finished it, I looked in the mirror and I was like, holy shit, dude, you just ran a half marathon barefoot, and on a rainy, cold day, and everybody else is like, they're squishing around in their shoes, which are all soggy, and they're wearing, clear trash bags for rain coverings, and they're all worried about it. And because you were able to sort of embrace the cold and just go barefoot, you're just like, woohoo, this is like a great weather, and like that puddle, oh, I welcome it because it's like comforting on my feet, So it's like that shift in perspective. I got to remember to like bring this back to the creative and the music, but it's all the same shit. It's like, picking a goal, remembering to reverse engineer it so that you can plan for it, so that you can actually reach to that point. And then also being willing to arrive at an alternate conclusion, realizing, shit, I still went a whole lot further than I thought I was going to go just because I had this plan to go here and I made it to, the halfway point marathon. And I just did this thing that's still way bigger than, when I was sitting on the couch thinking, oh, it'd be nice to go try, running one day, or I wonder what it would feel like to go out and run barefoot, and then the next time, then the next year comes around and there's that race again, or there's that opportunity to make another record or to record another song, even if it's the next day, or do another mix because now it's another session. And you now know that much more, and you're that further along, and all of a sudden you can, now hit that next goal that you want. So it's very encouraging to discover that stuff, And
I think that saying like the universe is mental, right? Like everything is mind. And when you do those, it's not a series of going from zero to a marathon. It's those little votes that you do for yourself. And I don't know if you do this, but every time I have a cold plunge, I'll just like, my alarm will go off and I'll just stay a little bit longer, and like, or, like where I used to swim. I've kind of stopped the past 6 months just because I'm a bit far away from the pool, but I just plan on doing 100 laps, right? So I'll do 100 laps. And then when I finish, I'll just do another lap, because it's just like pushing that little resilience button. And I think it's the same sometimes with making art. It's like, cool, we're here, we're done. But it's like, let's just as an exercise, let's just try and push a little bit further. And knowing you've got that save button in Pro Tools, right? Mix 1A, and then you'd be like, okay, now let's just push that a little bit further and just save it as mix 1B. And then just, and sometimes you got to go there to come back, And I think that's a great thing in the studio is like just allowing every idea to be valid. So if a drummer has an idea, you just try the idea. Like it's so much easier just to try the idea and do the thing and then come back to the way that it was, and making the drummer feel unheard, unappreciated. So just allowing that aspect of play and intrigue and curiosity in the same way that you would have done when you first got into running, right? It's just like, let's just see what happens. Let's just go at it with curiosity. Like, let's try and do that marathon. And, if we do a half marathon, that's amazing. But, you just got to try it.
Yeah. And then also, to the point with the drummer, because it's such a good lesson in the studio, is just remembering that like now you've got these two different versions. You can press play on both of them. And when everybody's back in the control room and you're listening, everybody has just removed themselves from the doing of the thing to the, now you're all just listeners. And often one will just present itself as better than the other. And if it doesn't, then it may very well just mean that they're both just as good. So it's like, whichever one you pick, it's going to be fine, and somebody who's got a strong feeling. That's one of the things I like to do is just like, whoever's got the strongest positive feeling about something, let's run with that. You know what I mean? Because there's a reason for it. Making music and making the art and making records is all about a positive feeling, or else we would never have even done this. We wouldn't even gotten interested in music. So it's driven by that, so if somebody can feel the inspiration of it, and they're really listening and they're paying attention, then, it's more likely that is where the value is than when we feel the negative, we find something negative. In the same way that like, you liked the punk rock, but you thought you didn't like this other thing. Well, you just didn't have the perspective yet.
Yeah.
And the other thing was great all along.
Exactly. And I think the speakers don't lie, right? You know, like when you do a take or an artist wants to try something, you just try the thing, you come listen to the speakers, and the speakers tell the truth. And I think like
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, when you're working with a band and they try an idea, everybody in the room knows if the idea works or doesn't. Maybe they might have a different opinion on taste, but they'll generally come to a consensus that this idea works or it doesn't. And if they're in that kind of like mid zone, it's like, cool, let's just run with it for now, because we can always go back to the old version, or we can always try something different later. But I think sometimes in the studio, people get so just caught up on a single idea that it just completely slows down the process, right? You know, and you could spend 30 minutes debating about the merits of a single idea, or you could just spend 30 minutes just moving on to the next thing, knowing that you've got the power of the mute button. You know, the mute button is your friend. I love that idea that a song isn't finished when you can't add anything more, but a song is finished when you can't take away anything else, you know, before it completely pulls apart. You know, the power of the mute button is so underappreciated. And I think, you know, you see that with like Chad Blake a lot, right? Where he just goes through and he's just like, no, muting the drums here, muting the bass line just for this like one bar. And man, that's how you make a really dynamic record, is actually like playing the silences, playing the gaps, rather than just filling in every single moment of the song. I'm definitely guilty of that, you know.
Yeah, and it's nice to have that's one of the things that a console or, you know, a fader pack for controllers where there's a lot of value. It's just that like you can quickly make something much louder or much softer to discover how did that change it? And you can just mute things. See what mutes are doing, you know?
Especially the faders. Like, I think that was one of the things that I learned in the film industry, is just how much emotion you can extract out of something by actually writing physical faders and listening to your body, right? And like you push it a little bit too far and you come back and it's like, you know, you can feel it in your chest when something's right. Whereas if you're just grabbing a mouse and going over the whole section of the bass and it's clipping it up by 1 dB, it's like you're doing that because of like a very technical or like mechanical or a mental exercise, as opposed to like an emotional exercise. Whereas when you're writing a single fader, it could just be one of those PreSonus Fireports or like an Avid, you know, artist series or something like that. Actually writing a fader can really, really inject a lot of emotion into a song. It's like a conductor, right? A conductor doesn't just like allow the symphony to just play at like a flat volume. He's writing them up and down and pushing and pulling and moving with the performance. And I think like the greatest mixing engineers tend to do that, right? You know, they've got faders under their fingers and they're flying things around and moving it and making it dynamic and interesting and pushing the guitars up in the chorus and pulling them down. Yeah, I mean, music is a very emotional art form. And you know, I think that's our jobs as professionals, is to try and really elevate the emotion, try and extract as much emotion as we can. You know, you imagine watching a film with no music and it's like, you're not going to feel as much. You know, people don't necessarily cry over a picture, but they will cry over a song.
That's interesting. Yeah. People won't necessarily cry over a picture. Is that what you said? But they will cry over a song.
Yeah, I mean, you know, to some extent, of course, there are certain pictures that you'll look at that have historical reasons to make you feel upset, right? You know, of course, we're going to see a lot.
Well, no, but I mean, no, but to your point, I mean, you're thinking like in creative work. So, like, in other words, the image that you see, or even the action you see on a screen in the film, doesn't really bring the emotion right to the forefront. But when you add the music to it, then the emotion is just like, it's almost like the music is your cue. It's your emotional cue, right?
And just sound in general, you know, like I've worked on so many films where you'll see the rough cut of the film and it's just got like the rough dialogue in there and a few sound effects and, you know, some kind of temp score or something like that. And you might watch it and you're like, that's a pretty cool film. And then you go and mix it and the director's there and you guys are, you know, you're working and you're trying to do the best that you can to bring it to life. And then you play down the reel and you're in tears because the sound has made you feel so emotional and so attached to the experience. And that's why most film directors that I've worked with, they all say that actually mixing the sound is their favorite part of the process, because it's the part that they literally, a lot of them echo the sentiment, is that that's where the film comes to life. Yeah. It really is that final bit where it's just like, oh, now it feels like a film. Now it feels like an emotional experience. As opposed to just like a series of images and, you know, a series of dialogues.
Well, I'm thinking about the musical analogy too, and you know, two versions of recording in the studio. One is the artists, or you know, the band is playing, everybody's performing the music together, and sometimes you're even performing as the engineer while that's happening, or, your rough mix is happening so quickly that there's a performance aspect to it. And then it's hard to, to your point, it's hard to, you try to reinvent it afterwards and it's not happening. But in a film, it really is by definition, I would guess, a, one brick at a time, piece by piece assembly and creation of stuff where nobody's really ever adding something exactly into the mix that's like, this is the finished thing, or maybe they are, and so maybe it's by definition, it's only through that mixing process that you really get to, you now have your orchestra in front of you and you can conduct,
Yeah, exactly. It really feels like I think of music production, and the same can be true for mixing a film. But I think of the process of music production like cooking a meal, right? It's like if you're having friends around for dinner, you want to create something that you're going to enjoy, but know that they're going to enjoy it as well, right? And to me, that's
right,
songwriting. Yeah. It's like it's writing a song that you're going to appreciate, that you like, but also you hope that the people that in your audience or whatever are going to appreciate it as well. And so that's the kind of like planning out the meal, and then you go to the farmer's market and you get the best produce and the ripest tomatoes and the freshest avocados, and that's the recording process, right? That's capturing all the ideas and getting everything in there. And then the editing process is dicing up the onions, making it like cutting everything into manageable chunks and having that all ready to go. And then the mixing process is putting everything in the pan, but you're not putting everything in the pan, right? Like just because you've got like 2 cups of coriander doesn't mean the meal needs 2 cups of coriander. It's like you put in just the right amount, and maybe you've got 4 onions there chopped up, but as you're putting it in, you're like, this is too many onions. We don't need this many onions. And so you're putting in just the right amount of everything, and then you taste it and you're putting in like just the right amount of basil. And that's the mixing process. And then the mastering process is like the plate that it goes on and just the right amount of salt and pepper, and it's like got the forks and knives in exactly the right spot. There's not all the like smudges around the edge of the plate to make it look presentable. And it very much feels like that process, right? Like every single part of the process is really, really important. But it's a linear thing where the most important part is deciding what the meal is going to be. Because if you're going to make like like a Rogan Josh or like a lamb korma, but you're a vegan, then you're going to end up getting to mealtime and you're like, oh, this is disappointing.
Are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble figuring out how to get your mixes to sound great? Do they sound weak and distant or lack punch and clarity? Well, I've got a gift for you to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot more like professional mixes. And it's my free course called Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is, these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Right. Well, it's funny because I'm now a raw vegan, so that's what I'm eating now. So I'm actually quite content just eating, fruit, delicious fruit, or making a salad. I call it a caveman salad, where I'm just eating with my hands, just the vegetables with no dressing or anything. But to your point, it's like, despite the fact that I might really enjoy that, and there might be something cool about it, if I want other people to experience it, I need to think larger than that. I need to think about like, well, how could this be, done in a different way that it is more appealing to somebody who's just walking into this for the first time? And there's a lot of that in music, right? There's like, we might be like, oh God, just that tracking performance was just an impeccable first take. But it's good to have that ability to also look at it and think like, yeah, but for the uninitiated to where I'm at right now, and in this particular song that I'm recording, what are the things I can do to sort of like help it enter everybody might enjoy it a little bit more space and like draw more people in. So I don't know. We can keep going forever, dude. Every time you say something, I'm like, oh man, I think this is a good idea.
I think me and you are very, very similar in a lot of ways. You know, I'm vegan as well.
Right.
I've been for like 15 years. And so, yeah, if someone's coming around to my house for dinner, it's like, I'm just not going to make a vegan meal that I know that I'm going to enjoy. I've got to like put my best foot forward to like make sure that I'm making something that they're going to enjoy. And I'm sure you're the same as a raw vegan, right? It's like, if you're hosting, it's like, man, what's the best dish that I can make right now that I'm going to love?
Yeah, right.
But also they're not just going to be like, oh, we're just eating like lettuce. Like, come on.
Right, exactly. Well, I'm brand new to it, so I haven't done any hosting yet, but other than making an acai bowl for a friend, and so far that was a hit. All right, so let me ask you about this too, dude. You have created something really cool to help indie artists release their music, and I wanted to make sure we got a chance to let you tell us about it, because, you know, if you're still here and you're still listening to this now, Rockstars, then you've enjoyed all the other stuff we're talking about. But at the end of the day, you know, you got to get your music out there into the world. So tell us about what you made.
Yeah,
or what you're working on.
It's the hardest thing, right? Like we put as artists and musicians and songwriters, we put so much work into creating the art, and we put all of our money and focus into just making the art sound as amazing as we can. And you know, you're feeling all the goosebumps, and the mix is slamming, and the mastering sounds huge. And then you get to that point and you're just like, oh, what next? Because that is the most important part of the process, right? Like it is a lot easier to have a good sounding song, like a good song, do well with really good marketing, than it is to have an amazing song with no marketing do well.
Right.
You know, and
right.
and so it's a part as practitioners that we often neglect. It's like, you know, it's the last thing we think about is releasing the music into the world. And so I think what's happened,
you know, the raw vegan analogy I was making, same thing, right? The marketing is the making sure other people will actually reach other people, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is it. Like people get to that point in the process and they're like, oh crap, like what now? And so it kind of just becomes like option paralysis, where they just don't know what to do. So they just put the damn thing out on Facebook or Instagram, be like, put out a record. And no one hears it because 250,000 songs have already been uploaded that same day. And so I think I made this resource for independent artists that were releasing music themselves to just try and like help them understand the process, like that series of like what we're talking about, do the next thing, right? And so this came about because I just was working with so many artists that would be coming to me being like, what should I do next? What should I do next? And I felt like I was having the same conversations over and over again with artists. And so originally, about 5 years ago, what I did was I started saving my email responses in text documents. So when someone says like, okay, like what's the best distributor, or like, how do I get an ISRC code or ISRC? I would just copy and paste from the text document into this. And I was just like, oh, this is getting tedious. Maybe I'll just put it in a document, right? And so I created like a 15-page resource for artists that just had all of that information and just gave it to every single artist that I worked with. And my partner was just like, you really need to update that resource. It's getting pretty dated. You know, I was just like, yeah, like, you know, I want to create something great. And so she's gone through and released her own song. She's an artist that I've produced called January Blue, who just released her first single a couple of weeks back. And she was like, well, let's use this as an experiment. Let's like go through and, you know, update this resource and do all the things that we need to do and make it more modern for 2025. So, you know, there's all these like TikTok prompts or Instagram prompts. There's like checklists of like what to do a month out before release, what to do 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, a day before, all of this stuff. So an artist can just sit there with the checklist and be like, every single day I'm going to do this one thing, just tick that one box. And it just streamlines the whole process rather than being this like giant behemoth that you're like, I don't know what to do next. It's like there's this document now where people can just be like, cool, I'm just going to go to the document and be like, what do I need to do next? And, you know, kind of make bite-sized chunks, just make it really, really small. That being said, it's a 113-page document, so it is a big document. But yeah, my partner just released her first song and she was just going through the resource. And, you know, our mutual friend, Chris Graham and Brian Hood, you know, they talked about their podcast being an advice buffet. And that very much is the same with this resource that I've created. It's not a resource where artists have to do every single thing that's in that document. It's just like, just go through and find things for inspiration, find ideas that you're like, oh, this is a good thing. Oh, I didn't think of this. And so originally the plan was we were just going to release it for free. We're just going to give it out to as many people as they want. But the thing that I know, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well, when you just download things for free, you've kind of assigned value to it that it's kind of worthless. It's not. It's just free, and you don't take it as seriously. Whereas as soon as you vote with your wallet and you're like, I'm going to actually invest a little bit in this, now you've basically said, okay, I've paid for this. I'm committing to actually reading this. And so I didn't want to put all this work into this document and then have people download it and then not actually use it, because I'm like, what's the point? The point is to like help artists. And so we set like a price of like $10, which is nothing, 2 cups of coffee. And the idea was that if people were just going to pay $10, it's not enough to actually affect their bank account, but it's also enough for them just mentally to be like, I'm investing in myself. I'm investing in trying to get this release out into the world. And I've had a lot of positive comments from a lot of people that have downloaded it and being like, this has been amazing. Like, I just didn't know what to do, but now I've got my song, it's all finished, it's ready to go. And now I've got these like list of steps and all these like radio station emails and stuff like that. I will have to say as well, this is very much the idea of this is focused for the New Zealand market. We are going to make an international one that's more focused on the broader community. But this was immediately created for the kind of New Zealand music industry. It's been a really great thing. It's an aspect of as a studio owner, just having like giving back to the community, trying to like help as many people as I can. There's also that like social proof and marketing from my own selfish reasons to just get the brand name out there more and more, and all those little things that you do as a business owner can really just help drive the branding and drive the workload and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's just a great thing to just help people, because I think my favorite part of the document actually talks about mental health. It talks about a lot of artists that suffer from burnout and suffer from depression after they release a song, because what is happening leading up to release, and I'm sure you've experienced this with your own musical projects, is like you're so excited by the possibility of what's going to happen, right? And you're like riding on this high of like putting it out there, and you've got nerves because people are going to listen to your song, and you release it and it kind of does okay. And, then you're like, and all that adrenaline, all that dopamine that you were just riding on, you crash. And so many artists that I've worked with really struggle from depression after they release a song, but nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it is. And they come out of it just being like,
at the end of a session, the end of a record, after the gig.
They've got nothing left in the tank and they just crash. And so to me, a really important part of that document was to talk about it, to just be like, hey, this is something to expect. Like, realize that when the song is out there in the world, you might feel depression. You might be feeling bummed. You might be feeling drained. And that's a perfectly normal thing. Almost everyone experiences that. I haven't really heard many people talk about that. And so I think a lot of people that go through this process, they release it and then they're just like, oh man, like I suck, or my music sucks, or, even the people that the music does well, it's still, they're riding high on emotion and it's going to come out. And at some point they're going to crash, like maybe the song is streaming really, really well, but at some point it will come down and then they're going to crash. They're going to start feeling like, oh damn, I'm only getting 100 plays a day instead of 1,000,
Well, give yourself, it's like finishing a mix or finishing a recording session, and then you notice sometimes you want to listen to it, but then you get sick of it and you think it kind of blows. And I remember learning a long time ago, I was like, what is the window before you come back and hear it with fresh ears? And at one point I decided that was 6 months, probably because I just had listened to some rough mix CD 6 months later. And I was like, holy shit, this was great. I don't even remember what we did, but it sounds great. It's great to get that kind of fresh perspective on things. Dude, it's been awesome having you on the show, man. We're going to definitely have to do this again. If you'll put up with me asking you so many damn questions that we just go on and on and on, I'd love to have you back sometime, because this is really, really fun stuff.
Yeah, man, I'd love to be back.
Before we go, man, let me ask you this question. I like to ask this of all our guests on the show. So that makes you special, because you're just like everybody else. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time and you find young Toby, and you're like, dude, your last name is spelled with 2 L's, Lloyd. And you say, listen, man, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. Maybe you're pivoting from the band thing into I wonder what it's like to record myself with this 4-track. And, what advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
What's so funny is I listen to this podcast so much and always get to those questions and listen to the questions. But then coming into this podcast, I didn't even think about the fact that this question would come up. So like,
great.
Yeah, that's
You're on the
hilarious.
spot, man.
Yeah, I was living in the moment that I forgot. I think I would just say back myself. Just trust your instinct. Trust what your body is telling you. Like when you produce a record and when you're listening to something, it's really, really easy to get caught up in the mind, but listen to the body. I think the body tells the truth. And I think I probably would have made a lot less mistakes if I was a lot more present. Now, I think it's really hard to get to presence of what your body is telling you when you're starting out, because there's so many mental things going on, so many technical aspects that you're focusing on. And I think you've got to master the technical. You've got to like get to the point that you understand compression, you understand EQ, you understand those things so much that it becomes instinctual. You're just turning a knob because you know that that's what it needs. So like just diving into the technical and just like almost just like becoming obsessed with it, so then you can forget about it, right? Because like at some point, if you're still having to worry about the technical, you're still worrying about if something's over compressed or whatever, you're being pulled away from what is actually happening in the moment. You're being pulled away from the creative and making the choices that actually really, really matter. But you can't make those choices until you've become an expert on the technical. So study the technical, like understand the technicality so you can forget about it. And I think that's really, really important, because as soon as you forget about it, then all of a sudden all these other sensations start arising and become more clear. Like the tempo's wrong, you're sitting there and you're just, you're focused and you're like, man, my heart's just like sitting there telling me that something's not right with the song. But if you're also worrying about like, oh, what does this compressor do? You're not going to be hearing those cues. That to me is really, really an important part, is like get to the creativity as quickly as you can by knowing the technical so well that you just don't have to worry about it.
And you kind of have to have done that, because otherwise you wouldn't have even known that the compressor was set wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, this is great, dude. What a blast, man. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I really enjoyed this. Let the rock stars know, how can they find you online? What if they just want to follow you, your Instagram? They want to, come listen to your tracks. Of course, we have a playlist in the show notes. We'll have links to stuff. But, if somebody has questions for you and wants to reach out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my website's tinytriumphrecordings.com. I'm just about to put out my Paper Mountains music project. So by the time that this interview comes out, you'll be able to find me on Spotify at Paper Mountains. Also on Instagram this is Paper Mountains.
Book them for a gig.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know if I'm going to be playing any live shows. That's next level intimidation. I think maybe I'll just be like the later period of the Beatles, where I'm just recording and not actually playing shows.
And not only that, but the worse sounding the PA, the better for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it'll just throw you right out of, you'll be out of your head. You'll be like, I don't even understand the sound. And then you'll be like, all right, this is an opportunity.
Yeah, man. No, it's great. But yeah, just reach out online. I'm on Instagram at Tiny Triumph Recordings. And yeah, just hit me up if you like to talk about all the stuff that we've been talking about. This is the stuff that I love to chat about. So thanks for having me, man. It's been so great, and it's crack up to see just how much we have in common on all the weird stuff that we do. It's great.
No doubt. I mean, Matt was right, man. I think he tried to give me that heads up. And if I ever remembered, listened to you and remembered the things you told me, I would have known that. No, just so yeah, this is awesome. And then your book that you've written about releasing your music, is that something that's available now for the rock stars, or just pay attention, it's coming down the road and you'll see it on the Tiny Triumph website?
Yeah, it's already out. And we're continuing to update it. So like, for all the artists that have already bought it, like every time we make an update, we just immediately send them a copy of it. And so pretty soon we're going to be putting in a lot of information about like Facebook meta ads, and kind of like GoFundMe campaigns like Kickstarter and all that kind of stuff. So it's a kind of constantly evolving beast that just gets more and more in depth.
Very cool, man. Well, Rockstars, thank you for watching this with us, and thank you for listening. If you're listening only, we're on, we're video now too, so come see the incredible view. And in fact, a boat did just pass behind you right now as we were finishing up. So it was great to see that. It kind of reminds me of when Tame Impala did Slow Rush. They did a live performance back in 2020. and they were at the performing from the beach house, and you could just see the sunset in the background during the entire show. And I was like, oh, that's a good look right there. And I forget, that's Kevin Parker. Is that New Zealand or is that Australia?
That's Australia, but you know what? It's crazy. I don't know if you've seen these. Have you seen this before?
What is it? Is that a
telepathic audio? No, it's a telepathic audio orchid, which Kevin Parker from Tame Impala just released as a synthesizer, and it's crazy.
Man.
It's crazy. It's basically a single octave keyboard, but on your left hand side you've got the chords, so you can basically just like hold a C on the single octave keyboard, but play like a minor, a diminished major seventh, and you just with your left hand you can literally just say what the chord is going to be. And it's just came out. It's crazy. Actually, a bunch of guys that I went to school with down in Nelson in New Zealand were the guys behind creating this with Kevin Parker. So it's like, a few degrees of separation there.
How cool,
that, like,
man.
for anyone that's like, maybe if you're not like amazing at like playing synths or keyboards, like this is an incredible ideas machine. And the cool thing about it as well is it's battery operated or USB operated. So you can literally just put it in your backpack, go to the beach and write songs with this little synthesizer.
Ooh, I love that. And here's why I dig that, because I did some of that. I went down to Costa Rica and wrote a bunch of songs on the beach and actually made a record this year doing that very thing. And one of my writing prompts as I would go each day to think, well, what should I do? Was, well, why don't I pick a new chord progression? And it seems like that would be a very easy way to just simply discover a new progression, something that you hadn't done before. And it gives you a new perspective, So that's
because I can't play jazz. I can play basic majors and minors, but as soon as you go on to like, ninths and all that kind of, all those jazz chords, I can't play that on a keyboard. Yeah. So this is perfect.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And then Rockstars, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button so that you get more of this stuff from us. Cause you just didn't get enough of us talking for 2.5 hours about philosophy of music. It's awesome. We even got a few mentions of the Hobbit sessions in there, which is just, boy, there must be a whole interview just about that, dude. And if you have questions or comments, please drop a comment in and let us know what you thought about this, that, or the other thing. Let us know what your philosophy is on music at any point during this. And if you have questions for Toby too, drop them in there and he's likely to see them, or I'll make sure he sees them and he'll be like, dude, stop bugging me. Toby, thanks for coming on the show with us, man. This is a blast, dude.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me, man.
I'm glad you were here, dude. I'll see you around the studio, and Rockstars, we'll see you around. We'll see you around the YouTubes and the podcast world. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our fantastic sponsors who help make this episode possible. iZotope, Native Instruments, Atom Audio, SAE Institute, Spectra 1964, and Picker. And remember to take advantage of our special coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off at iZotope.com and nativeinstruments.com for any plugin purchase. Don't forget, you can start mixing right now with my free course, Mixmaster Bundle. You'll find the link in the show notes below. And if you enjoyed Recording Studio Rockstars, please check out our sponsors also in those links in the show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They are going to help you make your best record ever. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this, it's a great way to help support the show, and I really appreciate it, and I thank you as well. I'd also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars. Vlad Weselchenko, Jeffrey Simmons, and Max Young. Thank you so much for watching and listening, rock stars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.